It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, April 17th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to do possibly something a little different in the middle of the show today. We'll see if I decide to change my mind, but somebody's been asking me to do sort of a break in the show and engage a little bit. And I obviously agree that it will help garner donations. And that's kind of the idea that was put forward to help this platform develop more revenue, is to just engage with the chat, ask questions, engage for, whatever period of time I decide it feels like it's necessary. It's hard for me because it's hard for me to break in the flow of the show, but I do think it's important for two reasons. One, of course, it'll help, revenue for the show to continue to do the daily wrap-ups and the articles and everything else, but it'll also help allow more engagement for people that may have particular questions that I may not really address. And so I just want to throw it out there. Again, I may very well change my mind, but I'm going to try to start rolling it into my practice, because I do think it's valuable for people to have that engagement. But on that note, just remind me in case I forget. But today, what we're going to talk about, of course, is probably the most predictable series of events that I've ever seen in politics in my entire life. I just am blown away by the stupidity of all that's happening today. I mean, it was exactly what nothing has really changed. I mean, there's been a momentum, or rather, there's been more events in this weird series of alleged events. It's like the best I can do to describe that, of Donald Trump and Iran and this back and forth. Now, I think it's pretty damn obvious. Let me put it this way. You can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump has lied many times for no other reason than to make it look like he was gaining some traction. And I don't know why you would need to do that if you were winning. Or any number of examples we can go through about how somehow you hold all the cards but need them to agree. It just doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, we should very much, just as much, consider that Iran could be lying in its interests in plenty of ways. My point in saying it is I would not shock me in the slightest. And I mean, and there are some examples I would argue I could point out, like, for example, when you get the back and forth and they claim they hit every target, and usually it's not the case. Those lies exist. But in this back and forth, it's just a one-sided, ridiculous, never-ending series of Trump claiming everything while nothing ever comes to pass. And this is actually kind of what Trump does. It's just, for some weird reason, more allowed to be acknowledged now than it ever was before. He's the same person he was last time. It's the same person. And it's not a left-right thing. I think Biden and Trump are just as ridiculous. I think the left and the right are all part of the same problem. And I could see what Trump was back then. We called it out back then. Called it in 2024, called blackpilled for it. Now it's all literally happening, and we just need to see that it's not new. So what we're going to talk about in this weird deal discussion is how Trump, one, is continuing to just push the lie. And I don't know why that makes sense, seeing as how he must know that we'll see it. And so it will only at best be a short-lived momentary win. Now, I'm open-minded enough to consider that these are all possible small moves in the interest of some larger deal-making thing Trump is doing. Even if that ends up being the case, let's be clear about the reality of the ends justifying the means is not illogical. That is a belligerent authoritarian mindset, that no matter what you do, as long as you get what you want, then it all works out. And that only even makes sense for people in power. But so my point in saying all that is that even if you get, which I highly doubt we will get, whatever you think Trump is promising, and even if you stand back and look, what he's saying now is not what he started out with promising, so it doesn't even mean anything then. But if it ends up with some kind of a positive turn, realize that it matters the way you get there. And if you strong arm everybody into a position and gain what you want, it effectively creates the same kind of momentary feigned victory he's dealing with now. Because let's say you get what you want. Well, then everyone else is conspiring all day long about how to take it back because you cheated them out of it, as opposed to making some kind of an agreement where everybody, there's compromise, but everybody gets somewhat of what they want. And that's how real peace is made, not through violence and strength and just military action. Strength obviously plays a factor, but when you go in the direction they're going in, you only guarantee more war, which, what do you know, happens to be very profitable and beneficial for a war-focused state. totally not coincidental. But when we get into this conversation of the actual agreements, I think it's important to recognize that Donald Trump is being dishonest, and what that shows you about the legitimacy, or rather the validity of their claims around somehow being militarily successful, one, but also that this is about anything that they claim it's about. We'll get into the blockade and how it makes sense that Trump would continue the blockade after Iran says it's not open entirely no matter what for everybody going forward, not even remotely what they said, or that they're giving up their nuclear enrichment, not what they said either, but that they ultimately said it was open for commercial with their guidance. You know, and what that really means in regard to why Trump would still block it if that was being allowed, and, you know, the possibility that they wanted this to be the case. But mostly that today. Few small points we're going to get into to start that I wanted you to see in regard to, or not necessarily to start, but just throughout the conversation that I want you to see just in case it gets missed. But today's large focus on Iran. Now, I want to make sure you saw some of the previous shows we just put up. If you're on Instagram, it looks like it just went down for some reason. And by the way, the opening, sorry that we were late today to get started. All sorts of stuff going on, not worth wasting your time about. Looks like the site's under attack again. Looks like things are not loading properly. We're still trying to work through some kind of transition of the site, just so you know. It's going to take a while. But and on that note, there will be some upcoming notes on the Odyssey overlap with the IMA website discussion. This is something that's still being kind of worked out, but it looks like they may well be Odyssey as a platform is just nixing the entire thing. And it's pretty frustrating. We'll go over this more in the future, probably on another IMA conversation. But people had asked why it had been taking so long. And remember, that was not even something that we started with in mind. That was something Odyssey added to say, hey, we want to do this with you. And we said, yeah, that sounds great. Our focus has always been on the content, just collecting, the people to come together on the IMA and have panels and discussions. And that was really the point. But we want to create something where you guys can all go and access the information. And the point was that it looks like Odyssey has just nixed the program, even though the people working on it within that were still working on it. It's still making headway. And it may be because it's not valuable, maybe because it's too problematic. I mean, even though they were stated that wasn't the case, I still wonder whether it had something to do with us being involved with it. But you can decide. Either way, the point was we are now working on our own version of it. Thank you. Big shout out to Tease for putting a lot of legwork into creating something for that. And it looks like that's going to come to play. So hopefully in the near future, you'll have something to go to for IMA focus. But not putting any predictions of time out there because things happen the way they do. But site and everything else. Now, back to the point. Had an amazing interview with James Corbett, which really, I just love speaking with James. It's always so insightful. And as you guys know, I respect him more than just about anybody. And we had a really interesting conversation about one thing he started with, but I made sure to clip in the beginning, was the conversation of the technate and technocracy and the historical conversation around it. And, surprise, surprise, what is one of the most important things they've always discussed as being a central controlling mechanism of creating a technate? Energy flow. Which is not that hard to wrap your mind around, but it's just interesting to think about with what we're watching today. And that was what we discussed. Trump's great reset in regard to the strait and the flow of energy, or his great blunder. Honestly, I'm leaning more towards his blunder in the way it's working, but I do think there are elements that are driving the reset part of this. I'm just not sure whether Trump even's aware of that or not. Maybe he just thinks he can point to it to make it look like he didn't fail. I don't know. But we had a great conversation in there, and James points out some of the historical elements that are important to see. And we get into the whole network state, Pronomos Capital Prospera kind of element of this and how that may connect, and then why it seems to make sense with the larger conversation. And it's really just a lot of theorizing because we don't really know for sure, right? We're just kind of discussing about what this may look like and how it overlaps. James is always somebody who you should consider. His opinions are, in my opinion, in my time doing this, his opinions are invaluable. Make sure you check that out. Now, I'll also include the last few shows on this just discussion in case you want to get caught up and haven't seen them. Trump's Blockade. And this was kind of on the same mindset. I did this show out before. I interviewed him the day before, James Corbett. Trump's Blockade and the Bluster, or the Real Agenda. And this one's discussed entitled After Sabotage Talks, because remember, they were sabotaged. That came out from Israel's side of this. There was an effort to, we're going to make a point about that today. It's not new. When you point to Gaza, you could point to Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Every time there's been these elements, there's been their Israeli and U.S. elements that have been sabotaging them. But after sabotage talks, Trump's call for effective closure of Hormuz Strait via military blockade. That was on the 12th, which on the 13th forward, even though he said the 12th, effectively went to play, and then ships had gone through. We'll talk about that. China's ships went through, even Iranian ships went through, despite all of the Nick Sorter, Eric Howderty lies out there telling you how it's 100% and we won. Didn't happen. Big surprise, I know. Shocking to find out that those people might be wrong about what they have to say. seeing as how they just parrot what the government tells them, even though they're deep state fighters that just parrot what the government says. The Trump Who Cried Wolf was a good episode on the 8th, talking about just the ongoing, lies about everything he wants to push. Now let's get into this. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. One other point I wanted to make, and then I did have a few partisan points I want to include. Hervoy sent this to me from the IMA. And I made sure I asked him, can I show this? I don't want to just show our conversations. I think that's a huge faux pas. But he says, I subscribe to numerous Substacks and they all come into his standard inbox. However, I know this is going to blow your mind, ladies and gentlemen, but the only one out of everything he gets, and this is not the first person I've heard this from. I think he has somebody you guys know. That's the difference. He said he's the only one, literally the only single one that it does not go in the folder, but goes to the spam folder. Now, you know how long I've been telling people that about my email, for example, how my emails just don't work and everyone acts like it's somehow my fault or like I'm not responding to them, even though they all know I've never stopped telling people that my email just doesn't function. I do my best to respond. Half the stuff goes to spam. Sometimes it doesn't even come through. Now, I'm not claiming to know what that is. Feels uniquely focused, but this is a similar thing. And I'm not even trying to make this about me. I just think it's interesting that you have these kind of carve-outs. And I do think it's interesting that TLAV has uniquely been focused on for such a very long time and not in some ebbing, flowing kind of, you're censored, that's why we can listen to you, you're Alex Jones, and not that kind of thing. Just a nonstop 2 steps back, 1 step forward lifestyle that never seen, that's pretty much everybody in the IMA. Anyway, just interesting to see that. Only one. I think you know why. I think I know why. Now, on the partisanship side of this, the nonpartisan objective reporting, which is why I think that's the case, Noxie points out that this is the same damn person. Now, some of these you've already seen. I didn't have a show the last couple of days, but this woman, and this is the reality, guys, and I don't know why this is not like, for example, if this is real, which it is, why wasn't this a major story? And I mean, it was covered, but like, not that this should even be like the headline story, but this is a really big deal, even though it's a small story. It shows you the kind of thing that these people are, both sides of it, by the way, but that Donald Trump literally manufactured some kind of a DoorDash thing. And it was all, and even DoorDash admitted it was sort of a promotional thing they just made up. Now, that's one thing that happens all the time, even though it's still dishonest, or people, they just manufacture personalized events to make you think they're normal people, right? This is the same person who was involved in a previous engagement. What was it again? This is just a point off the top of my head. I was looking into it earlier. What was it again? Now I'm forgetting. In any case, the point to be made here is that she had shown up in different examples being used by the Trump administration as somebody separate, as if it was unique and independent. It's the same kind of thing people ask on, even shooting conversations, because it's not the idea that we dismiss the idea that the government might fake something in any circumstance is so shockingly, willfully ignorant and naive. No matter how serious and no matter how crazy it may sound, the consideration is all I'm talking about. And in this case, it just shows you what they're constantly doing. And here's the clip down here from Gen X. Watch it in motion. And it gives you the actual side-by-side of her talking in Congress. It's the same person. I mean, it's verifiably the case. We're being gaslit, guys, constantly. And you know who else does that? All these same people involved, including J.D. Vance, which I think is hilarious to me as I keep pointing this out. Because their whole shtick right now, the U.S. government playing as a one side against the other is the idea that this one side of the same entity we're talking about is the ones fighting the deep state, right? We're the rebels pushing back. Well, that had some momentum when you were actually not in power. But now you have every controlling element of the government and you're in the White House. And he sits there and says, we need to help take our country back. Because it's about, the people aren't even questioning it. It feels good. Yes, because we're on the good side. We had to take it back from the people who aren't in power. That doesn't work, does it? But it only makes sense because you want to make it sound like you're the ones fighting the power because that's what got you here. The lie, in case you missed what I'm going on there, the lie, the misrepresentation of what they're doing. And while they now lean into everything they told you they were fighting, everything. Now, one example of this is the FISA conversation, which I'm glad to see. Massey effectively, pretty much by himself, but with some support, was able to stop this. Against Trump, everybody, Johnson, we're all about it. And it really bothered me, by the way, only because, I mean, Massey's not dumb. He must know what these people are, Nick Sorter and all the rest. So Nick comes out and does this and captions this and shares it and says, oh my God, Massey just saved us. He's celebrating a win against the deep state. Okay, well, that's interesting. So does Nick know that Trump was the one pushing for FISA reauthorization so effectively? Breaking news. Nick Sorter finally admits Trump is not fighting the deep state, but apparently was the one pushing its agenda with FISA until Massey stopped it. Now, obviously, I guarantee that's not how he wants you to frame that, but that's what is happening here. And this is just sad. And what I forget where I posted it, but underneath one of these conversations, I think it was Massey captioned Nick and made a comment about it. And I'm just thinking, why are you giving this guy reach? Because the point is, if you understand this person and what he's done the entire time, this person, like the rest of them, you must know that he's probably a few supporters away from cheering for Matt FISA happening. And you must see this with the rest of them. These people will support what the team does. Had Team Republicans the momentum been behind passing FISA, and a lot of the team, like all the rest of the Republican commentators were like, it's good, it's for freedom, he would have been going, yay, freedom, yay, FISA, even though he's got 1,000 comments of saying it's bad. And I don't need to prove this to you guys. Every one of them does this every day, from Cat Turd to the rest. They will come out and say, bad, bad, bad. Then it happens. And they go, well, it's okay because Trump, right? It's okay, gas price, because Iran or whatever. They're hypocrites. And so what frustrates me is he can come out here and starts cheering on what he's been fighting because Massey did it. Now, I don't mean in this moment. I mean historically. Whatever the Trump team does and Massey bad. He's been calling out Massey the entire time until very recently. And just think about saying that out here celebrating a win against the deep state. The only alternative is that Trump and the side pushing for FISA was the deep state, or at the very least, agents of the deep state. So work that out for this guy's look at every other comment. It's all, yay, Trump did it. We're winning. Iran beating Iran. Trump's the winner. And then, but he's a deep state, though. It's very Alex Jones of you. He might be the Antichrist, but, I don't know. I'm going to keep supporting him. Good job, guys. Hashtag two-party illusion. As 5 Times August aptly puts, and this is the reality of not the blind, outside of the blind partisan supporters. So in conclusion, there was no 5D chess. Accountability wasn't coming. DC wasn't in panic. They didn't have everything. All wouldn't be exposed. Nobody was going to Gitmo. Patriots weren't in control. Where we go one, we don't go all. Criminals F around and never find out. And there was no plan to trust. Because if you're actually paying attention, everything didn't happen. But here he is cheering on what Massey does in challenge against Trump. Things are shifting if you can't get the point so far. And it's not about, these are just shamelessly fair weather people who are just jumping sides. Haven't we always told you that's what they do? It'll be one strong story away from them jumping right back to supporting whatever the next team says. It's who they are, guys. Now, on the point of this story that's being aggressively misrepresented by all those same people. As Health Ranger rightly points out, this is on the 13th. And this is, of course, this Bricks News channel shows a lot of fake information. But not, whenever you say something like that, it should never be taken as then we should ignore everything they have to say. Some of the stuff they point to is true. Just consider that everybody out there can lie, and there are accounts like this that just seem to be 50-50 about it. But it says 121 empty tankers are now heading to the United States. Now, there's been some tankers clearly, but what's interesting about this is it was aggressively misrepresented. And he goes, yes, it's fake news about the wave of empty tankers. Most of them were acting like they were pulling up against the shores. They announced this like 12 hours before this. It wasn't possible. And of course, you could have just looked at GPS, which I'll show you in a second. Now, this is just to get you caught up with where we are today. He says, typical White House propaganda. So again, I'm glad to see that Mike Adams is calling out in a consistent way the typical White House propaganda. But it shouldn't, my point is I think the only reason certain people suddenly didn't call it out was because they thought Trump was different. Even though the lies, the propaganda, the same stuff was still happening. So my point is that people just put on blinders and choose to not call it out. I don't care how much I supported somebody or how much I thought they were doing the right thing. If they did something I didn't agree with and I thought challenged what they said they were doing, I would be screaming about that more than every other thing going on. And it may seem counterintuitive to some because aren't there bigger things happening? Well, yes, but it matters to me more than anything that this person is pretending to be the right thing while not doing that. It's just like I always talk about. The worst of the worst are the people that aren't just going on to doing the bad thing, but doing the bad thing and then pretending they're doing good and screaming for praise while they commit murder. That's the kind of darkness that we're fighting. Empty tankers are always empty on one leg, and he goes on to make the point. And this is a good point. The simple reality is you were lied to about the idea that tankers were flooding over to the United States, and it was about trying to justify this transition. Yes, prices are exploding, but it's okay because we're reimagining the system. Now, because it seems this wasn't really happening the way they framed it was, I'm leaning more in the direction that this was sort of a Trump got wind of that narrative passing around and said, perfect, we'll just claim we're doing that. It'll probably give us a few weeks of leeway. Or that's the plan. You can decide. I think that's where they're at right now. I think that's how desperate they are. And for crying out loud, I've pretty clearly been proven to be correct about that level of desperation many times over the last couple of years. The people promoting this as some sort of Trump victory are truly stupid. I agree with him. Now, here's somebody who I followed during COVID. Now, who's to know whether this person believes it, is wrong, is lying? You can decide for yourself. I think a lot of people who kind of got awake to a lot of the nonsense going on during the medical stuff during COVID have failed to recognize the other part of that that's not just medical. When a lot of the people who were like, yes, you're right about the COVID stuff, were wildly dishonest people in every other field. And some of these people have yet to see that. Not him or anybody in particular, just that is a real thing happening, which you all know, right? We all talk about the grifters during the COVID frame that sort of leaned into the truth very late to sort of get people, honest doctors out there to think they were the good people fighting for freedom. And they weren't. But this person, Dr. Uso, says, this isn't the Strait of Hormuz. This is the Gulf of America. No, it's not. This is the Gulf of Mexico. And it says hundreds of super tankers from every corner of the planet are racing to Texas, to Louisiana to fill up the cheap. Nope, that was the 13th. Now, as I tried to point out that very few seem to care about, and of course, this platform wildly suppresses the honest statement in all the lies, which is that this is the all ships view. I'm sure you guys know this because we've been doing this a lot, right? This is the all ships view, as you guys have seen, right? That's why it looks like that. That's the Gulf of Mexico. And that's what that is. That's the all ships view. Now, even right now, or back then, had you gone to tankers, which is what they were trying to show you. Oh, I need to scroll back over again. I just have it on Strait of Hormuz right now. This is what you would see. And I post the image somewhere else. Now, even at that time, that's what it looked like. No, not flooding over. No, not even close. Now, this is different today than it was. There was a few more before, but this was the reality then. So did they not know that? Or are they just trying to hype this? And I said right there, nope, that's the all ship view. 3 likes, 3. Like, and you can easily demonstrate this. Wouldn't you think that people go, hey, thank you for pointing out the truth. This platform very much leans into the promotional, beneficial lie or disregard for the truth, just like it did before. It's only worse. Now, someone else, Texas Girl X, 300,000 followers, says real-time energy takeover, baby. And this is my point, right? So we were talking about this a few days before, going, this whole argument about the blocking of the strait and kind of the energy takeover, is it going to be used as an excuse to blame, like to act like Trump is somehow winning secretly? And then it just exploded across the field. And all of these conservatives who were like, perfect, like I think Trump might be doing himself, this excuse makes it look like Trump is secretly winning the entire time. Trust the plan. I'm going to lean into that without anything and then show you a picture that's been circulating of the all ships view that is not of tankers. And that's what you get. This ain't the strait. It's the strait. Same thing. It's the Gulf of America. Hundreds of super tankers just pasting and copying and pasting and copying. And these are huge influencing accounts. And I said, nope. A lot of these posts are showing these images, claiming that they're tankers. They're not. The all ships view. And this is what it looked like at that moment. That's it. So they're lying to you or they're being misled. It's simple. And here you had Nick Sorter saying President Trump's blockade of Strait of Hormuz is costing Iran $400 million a day on the 13th. Well, that appears to be incorrect. Surprise, surprise. I know it's shocking to find these things out. But what's interesting is this is based on the idea that they had somehow shut everything down. Well, that's not what happened. But this is the kind of nonsense you get from Fox and CNN. Hyperbolic, assumptive reporting based on the agenda of the government that they claim to be fighting in other contexts. So the reality is that there were Chinese ships that were going through. There were Iranian ships that were going through, and you could literally prove this. In fact, in a second, I'll go to the, oil tanker, that account that has a very real-time map of real GPS showing you that, which, guys, it's always been there. You have the tools. I'm sure most of you already knew this because you watch this show and because you can look for yourselves. But here's an example. This is on the 14th. Thomas says, I've watched the Maritime app, which again, I've included every time. You guys can do it yourselves. I've watched the maritime map of the strait for about 10 days on this on the 14th. Noting that I am no maritime expert, I've failed to see any difference during the past 18 hours. Now, this is, by the way, well into the 14th. As Trump said, it took effect at the beginning of the 14th. And technically, it was supposed to be on the 13th, even the 12th. Technically, it was the 13th. But basically, he said, it's in effect immediately. And then everyone's like, well, you got to give him 24 hours. It's like, well, that's not what immediately means. Just funny how the partisan game plays. Iran flagships seem to be moving in and out of the Strait of Hormuz like they have till this day, which I agree. I saw the same thing. Now, tankers, military, pleasure vessel, these are all different things. This map is of all traffic, right? But the point was Trump said all. He said first he said everything. Then it got watered down to, well, only Iranian ports and Iranian ships, which, yeah, maybe that's what he meant in the beginning, but that's not what he said. All you can do is take it at face value, the words he says, while questioning, because he could be lying as usual, like any of them. But then, okay, Iranian ports and Iranian ships. And that still didn't seem to happen. Every ship going through the strait does it through the Iranian checkpoint between the two islands. There's also the typical huge gathering around the UAE port. Where's the blockade? As far as I could tell, it didn't exist. And I said, thank you. All you have to do is look for yourself to see that this admin is lying about everything. Stop listening to these partisan hacks who just repeat what the government says. Now, here is what I was talking about. This one's from the 17th, from today. Tankertrackers.com. Now, I'm going to come back to this, but we're going to stay with the 13th for a moment, but I want you to see this all the way to today. It simply says, as you can clearly see, and this account has a lot of this stuff. Now, if you actually look at the account too, you'll find that it's not a partisan account. Some of these things seem to benefit what Trump is pointing out. I believe it might, what it looks like, and I don't want to speak for the account, or who knows what will happen tomorrow, but it looks like a pretty apolitical just reporting of what they see on the trackers. And it says, as you can clearly see in this 3-day long AIS playback since the blockade line was drawn between the eastern Horn of Oman and the Irani-Pakistan border, a lot of tankers, which have been placed specifically under U.S. sanctions, have been entering and departing the scene with ease. Is it, for crying out loud, guys, we live in a fantasy world right now where this stuff can be self-evident. And yet there's like 10 of us. I can count on both my hands how many people are out there actually pointing to this. But CNN and Fox News and every channel and every mainstream alternative, everybody's like, it's either closed or it's wild to me. I have to believe that's, I'm not going to personalize. The point is that this is all there. So you need to reflect on all the people out there, and whether it's dishonesty, opportunism, profiteering, or whatever it is, who are just trying to lead you astray. And I says, why can't we just be honest about this stuff? Partisan team sport politics, that's why. And if you ask yourself why the left doesn't call this out right now, well, now you're asking the right questions. They're not actually fighting each other. Now, those two things may feel counterintuitive until you fully understand what we're talking about. Team sport politics is just to get you guys fighting each other. The two-party illusion is so the ultimate point is that they're not fighting each other. They need you guys to fight each other, or us to fight each other. Now, we'll come back to that. Now, as Robert Barnes says, Vance had a deal. Then the real president, Bibi, told him no. That's the way he frames it. You could argue that's how it went down. Trump is just a messenger boy these days. Because the reality, remember, is that even Netanyahu bragged that Vance was relaying moment to moment what was going on to Bibi, not Trump. And then ultimately, he talked to Bibi, according to everybody else in the room, to Netanyahu, and then the deal was canceled. And even Mario says, the story of why the Islamabad talks collapsed just changed completely. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a near deal that fell apart at the final hours, and the Iranians didn't even know it was over until Vance walked into the podium. Now, I wouldn't take this framing at face value, seeing as how Mario just repeats what he's handed. Like, oh, the story just changed? Well, it changed because at first you just here's what I was told, but you don't really frame it that way often, do you? And we'll get into that in a second. It's the same thing. This is a mainstream manipulative account, no matter whether he knows that or not. The reality of this was clear from the very beginning. But as Robert Barnes rightly points out, it's been obvious and self-evident to me, at least, that Netanyahu's been the one driving this from day one. And every time he wants to stop something, just like with Gaza, it easily stops. And this is interesting to me. Now, I always ask on these, do they really not realize what they just said? Now, what we're going to get into is Vance essentially saying, well, we can do that too. Terrorism. It's really what he says. So is the point that he wants to drive the world into a place where it's not a crime in whatever you do, as long as you're the one fighting the bad guy, or how you frame that? Or is it that somebody else is driving this country into collapse? I'm not sure. There could be something else as well. But how in the world do you think it makes sense for our government to broadly just admit that they're willing to do the same thing back? That they're not better or above or fighting for some larger ideological change. No, we're just the same. We're just more powerful. How does that suit anybody's agendas right now?
Comes to weapons of war, what they have done is engage in this act of economic terrorism against the entire world. They basically threatened any ship that's moving through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, as the President of the United States showed,
They didn't.
Two can play at that game. And if the Iranians are going to try to engage in economic terrorism, we're going to abide by a simple principle that no Iranian ships are getting out either.
Right. So, see, you could tell that he kind of slipped and recognized what he said, but two could play at that game. There's no way you must understand that. Oh, so we can do economic terrorism back, which is not new, guys. Sanctions are economic terrorism. There's no, I mean, anybody honest will admit that to you. That's what it is. It's a financial attack against the country that is supposed to affect the weakest people, to drive them against their government to cause change. It's literally documented. So the point is what he's saying, well, we can do it back. The only problem here, though, is that's not what Iran was doing. And I've been saying this from the very beginning. I've been proving this from the very beginning, just like we did with the tracker and everything else. They have not, I mean, and they said as much. It's the equivalent of them going, they refuse to get rid of nuclear, but they're right over here going, we'll get rid of it right now. Well, they're not refusing. Clearly, you either don't believe them and you're lying to us, or you didn't even know they said that, which is pretty crazy. So here we are, right? We're willing to attack you for this control, the economic terrorism.
World. They basically threatened any ship that's moving through the Straits of.
That's the important part. You know as well as I, what they did was threaten the ones fighting them. And we're going to get into it yet again today, that the reporting was clearly, and I'm telling you, it's still my opinion, but I am more and more convinced every day that this was always a manipulation, that the Strait was never closed down. It was restricted to them. There were no mines in the water. These were all narratives put out by the U.S. and Israel to create the very blockade that they wanted. That's what I believe. Now, whether that's because of some massive Great Reset transition or just because they wanted to be able to take control, even though they knew it would hurt you, Americans, and everybody else, they just want control for their interest, for Netanyahu's interest, that they planned for Iran to do that. They didn't take the bait, and so they made it happen themselves. So all he's saying now is, oh, yeah, we could do that back. Well, they didn't do it. So you're just manufacturing your illegal terrorism based on the idea that they started it.
Hormuz. Well, as the President of the United States showed, two can play at that game. And if the Iranians are going to try to engage in economic terrorism, we're going to abide by a simple principle that no Iranian ships are getting out either. We know that's a big deal to them. We know that applies additional economic leverage. And again, Brett, the president wants the Iranian people to thrive and succeed.
Clearly not, right? I mean, that's not even talked about anymore. This argument about freedom and revolution, I mean, they're like straight and oil and control. They're not even on the table because anybody who's not completely brain dead already knew they weren't the conversation. I mean, how are the Iraqi people faring? How are the Syrian people faring? How are the Libyan people faring? How are the Bolivian people faring? How are any other country they've ever been involved in? How are they faring? Well, guess what? They're all, to a man, to a woman, suffering. Their countries are distracting. I shouldn't say to a man. The point is, though, as a broad society, struggling. These are the liberated countries saved by the U.S. government. I mean, guys, this is my point about every conversation. How are we going to let them sit there and act like they're the ones benevolently saving people when every example they pretend is there is utter chaos and destruction and occupation, and one by one being sold out to the very terrorists they claim they were always fighting because, they weren't actually fighting them. I hope we can finally start to get there.
He has had his negotiation team put on the table a serious proposal. The ball is in Iran's court. Did we make progress? Yes.
How?
But we're going to find out from the Iranians whether we can make that ultimate bit of progress that gets us to a big deal.
Oh, okay. That's a ridiculous way of saying that we didn't get progress. So you keep telling us, oh, we're just about, they want to deal so badly, and then it doesn't happen. Okay, well, if they wanted it so badly, then why didn't it happen? Oh, we're just about to be right. We just need to nail down the final point. And then Iran goes and they're not agreeing with anything. Every single point, which is, by the way, the same 10 points they've been demanding since months ago. Because if you've ever paid attention so far, they never changed. The U.S. and Vance and all the rest are like, we're so close, and they demanded this, and they're pleading with us. Please, Trump, help me end this. And they sit down, they go, no, we don't want that. We want only these 10 points. And they walk away and go, oh, we're so close to a deal. It's just so stupid. It's like Blinken in Gaza. We all see it. And we're literally fighting with a bunch of Zionist and manipulative partisan team players. That's a lot of people, by the way, and a lot of very wealthy and influential and powerful people. But it's not the majority, guys. It's just very obvious. And as Iran rightly keeps pointing out, we do not want to extort anybody. We want a regulatory role in the Strait, like every other country around every other Strait canal in the world. But apparently they're terrorists because they want that normal thing. But you see, again, like always, they're not going, we don't believe you. Because you could argue that. You could say, well, we don't trust you. We think you're going to do something bad. They say, they tell us they're going to extort, that we're going to control and steal and rob. They're not doing that. And you have to recognize how weak these people are if that's the best they can do. And of course, this is what you get from these red light holy crap guys. JD Vance, Mike dropped Iran. They basically threaten any ship that's moving in the strait, which is basically not even remotely true, but great job, journalist. And as President Trump showed, two can play at that game. You got to love it. He's crushing it. Right. Vance comes out and goes, we can be terrorists. And he goes, woo, freedom. Hashtag MAGA, we're winning. Even though that's not true at all. But, that's what you get. And here's Ron Flipkowski. This is so embarrassing. On the 6th of February, he literally said they want to make a deal very badly. On the 2nd of March, they want to make a deal badly. The 16th, they want to make a deal badly. On the 24th, and each one of these times, they had moments where they were discussing and meeting and negotiating. Okay, on the 24th, they want to deal badly. On the 25th, they want to deal badly. On the 1st of April, they want to deal really badly. On the 13th, they want to deal bad. 14th, they want to deal really badly. Okay, well, it's the 17th, and guess what? I'm sure you know where it's going. They already said no again. Now, Trump is saying they agreed to everything, and Iran's saying that's not true. None of that is true. We're right back where we started. Now we're going to get into that. But this is how absurd this is. You don't think Trump knows that we'll be able to see through it? You have to ask, why would he do that? I can only see two obvious desperation, because there's no other good choice, or because somebody's making him do it. I, of course, could be missing something. But how do we not acknowledge that? Now, here's what Al Mayadeen English put out. This is from Iran on the 15th. So on the 14th, Trump says they want to deal so badly. Okay, well, here is the member of the Expediency Discernment Council of Iran affirming, quote, Iran will not, under any circumstances, back down from our 10-point proposal despite U.S. naval blockades. He further warned that any U.S. ground intervention would mean thousands of soldiers falling into captivity. He further added that Washington's threat of blockade is nothing more than psychological warfare that will not change Iran's position, which anybody could have seen that coming, seeing as how they've planned for this. He argued that the United States, quote, fears prolonged wars of attrition, while Iran is prepared and accustomed to such confrontations. Yeah, they did that. They're the ones that gave them that preparation, claiming that President Donald Trump is acting under the influence of decisions taken behind the scenes by Netanyahu and the wider U.S. Zionist capitalist establishment, as he attempts to present himself as a policeman of the Strait of Hormuz, and very ineffectually, by the way. He further argued that the U.S. failure stems from the misunderstanding of global transformations, Trump's poor political management, and the military ignorance of the Secretary of War, as Egg said. They're calling him out personally. He asserted that while Iran is currently exercising military restraint, which, guys, that's obvious. You realize that, right, even before the whatever ceasefire we pretend we're dealing with right now, even though we'll get into that in a second, and the lies within it, as Israel has already violated the one against Lebanon. Now, I'm going to check as we get to the end, and we'll find out if they're doing it right now. Haven't as of today, not that I can find out, but the very moment it took place, like they do every time, they showed the world that we don't care, or they don't care, and they bombed Lebanese locations, and nobody cared. But restraint would mean that all these times before, Iran could have been doing everything they were doing. They could have been bombing schools and hospitals and everything else. They did not. They love to scream narratives, but you can prove it like we keep saying. This is not Gaza. The Zionists need you to have a blacked out location they can lie about. The reality is we can see it. You know what we can also prove? They've been bombing schools and hospitals and locations and ambulances, just like they do everywhere else. Lebanon, Gaza, Syria. Iran. Just kills me, guys. It's just, anyway. So reality is that we will not falter. Now, he could be lying, of course, blustering just to make it look like they're strong. Now, but like I've been saying, if this was the first time it was happening, well, yeah, maybe you could argue they just are about to collapse and they need to project strength. However, it's happened. That tweet doesn't even do it justice. It's probably happened 15 times where Trump comes out and goes, "They're so close, they begged me," and then you get this statement. Then they meet for a conversation. Then they turn down what Trump said. Then he comes out and goes, "They're begging me for a deal." It takes a special kind of stupid to not see what that shows you. Now, here's what Trump had to say on the 16th, right? The next day after this. So we will never compromise on the 10-point demands. Trump comes out after on the 14th saying they want to deal very badly and says, if there's no deal, fighting will resume. Okay. So for the honest people in the room, explain to me how on the 14th or the 15th or the 12th or the 3rd or the 6th or however many times before, they want a deal so badly or they're begging me for a deal. And then you need to come out and say, if you don't make the deal that you're begging me for, we have to go back to fighting. So an honest person's going to go, oh, okay, so they're not begging him for a deal. Okay, so Trump was lying, or Trump's being lied to. That's it, guys. It's not hard to recognize. I mean, I could be as objective as possible and say maybe there's some kind of unknown in this that makes that make sense outside of what I'm saying, but it's definitely not that Iran is desperately seeking a deal, because you know how I know that? Because they would make a deal, guys. I mean, it's just not that hard to recognize. And I only mean that in the sense of what Trump is claiming, that they're like obliterated and they have no way to defend themselves. And it's not like they have anything to negotiate with. They have no cards left, he told us. So then why wouldn't they take a deal? Why would Trump even be offering a deal? I don't need to waste this on you guys. I know you already know this stuff, but it's just pathetic, isn't it? Now, here is the 10 points, if you want to remember what they are, that Iran has put forward from, I don't know, a month and a half ago, whenever that came out, where they said, we're done with this. After you bombed us for the second time in negotiations, we're done with you. Now, that doesn't mean that, like I said, the last time when the U.S. clearly, as the thing continues to be shown, that they came and offered them the 10 points. And that's why Iran said, okay, we'll meet in Islamabad. And they showed up and they didn't offer what they said. And that's why it got shut down. It's deductive logic here. So I think it's because Trump needs these momentary wins. Maybe that's just because they're siphoning off money from the exchange or the stock market, because they're using these statements to manipulate the market. But either way, U.S. commitment to ensure no acts of aggression. So they're not going to do that. I guarantee you Trump's not going to go, we commit to no more acts. They're going to say, well, we might need to, and they're not going to do it. Just like Israel when we get to Lebanon, which is just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. They've been violating the ceasefire since 2024 and the one before that, and yet now we're going to make a deal with Lebanon, even though that's not Hezbollah we're talking about, and you make a deal for defense. I mean, it's painful that the same old reporting we'll get to it in a second. It's just, for those who've been following the Lebanon part of this, it just pains me how it can be so blind to the reality of it. And then you're going to pretend like Israel's not going to do what we all know they're going to do and probably already have since I've been talking. Number 2, continued Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, they don't want that. And this is my point. Iran has been standing by this same 10 points this whole time. Acceptance of Iran's nuclear enrichment. Well, Trump said they gave it up today. Guess what, though? They already offered to give it up back on the 28th. Which had never been reached before. I want you guys to remember this. I'm going to bring it up every single time. The foreign minister of Oman publicly admitted that they had agreed to no enrichment and to give up their stockpile. They've never done that before. And guess what happened that night? Israel bombed them on the 28th to stop that deal, like they do every single time. That may not make sense to you if you think they're seeking peace, if you think that they want to stop, or if you think that they even have interest in nuclear weapons. Israel's using this as a means to an end. So when they actually give it up, well, guess what? Now there's no justification. So we had to stop that and say they lied or whatever the thing Israel does. Lifting all primary saying, my point in saying that, by the way, was they had offered it, but they blew it up twice. So today, Iran is claiming that they do not want to give it up because they already stopped that agreement. Now, but understand, if they decided to go back to this right now, which I wouldn't begrudge them, if they actually thought they would actually see some kind of upheld peace, because at the end of the day, they still didn't lose. Because the point is, Trump went through all of this to end up right where he was in the February 28th with actually a weaker position. You've given Iran more control, more influence, more engagement with the deal, and you still got what you already had on February 28th. So even if it goes that way and they scream a win, watch, they're doing it today. They're going to say, Trump did it. They opened the strait and he stopped the nuclear bomb. Well, guess what? That was already there. And by the way, they were both exactly the way they were before we got even to the 28th. It was open. They weren't seeking nukes before that. Painful. Lifting all primary sanctions. Lifting all secondary sanctions, termination of all the UN Security Council resolutions against Iran. They're never going to do all this. Termination of the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors resolutions against Iran. Payment of damages to Iran for loss of war. Never going to happen. Withdrawal of U.S. combat forces. Now, here's my point. They did this because they wanted this to be something they had to give in for. They were willing to come to the table before. That's evident to everybody who's honest. Now, because they bombed them while they were negotiating, they're putting their foot down. They're in for the long haul, as far as I can tell. And they want this to hurt when they give in. That's what it looks like to me. And of course, secession, including Lebanon, which everybody knew, which was involved in Islamabad. The Pakistani foreign minister made it clear. And they knew that, and the record shows Trump agreed, then Netanyahu pushed back, and then they all acted like they didn't know about it. Again, obvious Netanyahu's in control here. Now, this is from today. Iran says Hormuz Strait completely open, says corporate media. Now, I want to stress the idea of how different this is. We're supposed to believe the Hill is the Democrat platform who wants to take down Trump, right? In whatever context they want that to be the case. But so obvious how whenever it's war or Israel, they all seem to take the same tact. Yes, obvious. It's not completely open. And they use that term, but I'll show you what Argacci actually said and how casually they leave out, or even more interesting, how the Hill, the Democrat deep state platform fighting Trump all the time, literally quotes Trump exactly as if it's fact. Iran announced that the critical global supply lane known as the Strait of Hormuz is, quote, completely open. And that's it, though. Oh, I'm sorry. I forget this was the one they included what he said in the quote. So I'll give him that. There's another one I was reading that just basically quote, but other than that, it's basically what Trump had to say. So here's what Argacci said, and I'll show you in a second. He says, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, which we'll talk about in the latter half, which is just disgusting. And I guarantee, well, it has already been violated, but I guarantee based on what Israel has written down, just like last time, it is designed to fail. So they can blame Lebanon, or rather Hezbollah, and then bomb Lebanon as Hezbollah, regardless. And it says, the passage for all commercial vessels through the strait is declared completely open for the remaining of the ceasefire and on the coordinated route as already announced. So Trump comes out and was open forever. We did it. We won, essentially. Very different already, right? And he knows this. It's posted publicly. And they agreed to commercial vessels, not, so basically no military. And I guess no civilian. That's the only ones allowed, so it's not completely open then, right there, and that it would be only during this supposed ceasefire. And then, should they violate any part of this momentary ceasefire, leading until another talk, which I'm still blown away by, then they will go right back to doing what they're doing. In no way does that mean open forever, and they agreed, and they gave up their nuclear enrichment, which doesn't even seem to be on the table. How do you make sense of that? Desperation, in my opinion. And it says on the coordinated route as announced. So on top of that, the last part was that every one of them, even if it's only commercial, has to be guided through particularly by Iran. That's not what Trump's saying. That's not what all the screaming partisans are acting like he just won. And it's definitely not going to be something they agreed to, I think. I think what it was, honestly, is about getting this momentary, we did it for markets. And I guess that's it. I can't even think of why half a day win would gain them anything. President Trump reacted enthusiastically to Iran's announcements. And this is why I tend to think more in this moment that it's kind of Trump being told by Witkoff and Kushner and Netanyahu that that's what they said. And then maybe he genuinely thinks Iran lies about this stuff. I don't know, which is certainly one of the possibilities. But again, the evidence clearly points towards Trump in every circumstance. He said enthusiastically to Iran's announcement, but said the U.S. blockade remains in place, which doesn't make sense, does it? He says it's only until we agree to a deal. Well, but okay, if they're the ones saying it's open and you're maintaining the blockade, then then right now it's not open. You're blocking things. Why would that make sense to anybody unless they wanted this to be the blockade from the very beginning? And he wrote, Iran has announced the strait Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. You see, that's the exact opposite of that is not what they said. It's open for specific things for a period of time while Iran's guiding it through. In a subsequent post, the president said the U.S. blockade on the strait will remain in full force until long-term deal is reached. I'm willing to bet you anything that alone will be a violation for Iran. And probably as we speak, it's already going back to what it was a second ago, which is what happens every time. We'll wait and see tomorrow. But just in case you missed what I'm saying is that Trump saying he's going to maintain the blockade when one of these discussions is about allowing this to go back to normal until they get to the next discussion. That's in course, unless Israel does what it always does in the meantime, that they ultimately that their full force blockade in the meantime will be seen by Iran as a violation of that agreement. That's what I think. The Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage. Also, and still incorrect. But the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran, he says, only. Well, right now, I can prove to you that Iranian ships, whether by incompetence or not, have been getting through. Only such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. Our transaction? Guys, you need to really think about why that term was used. Our transaction. Because that is how he sees this. And the idea that they're telling you they're not giving money to Iran, you know how embarrassing it would be. I said this before. If he gives money to Iran based on all of his hype about Obama simply giving back money that they stole from Iran, which was the same thing he'd be doing right now. And I'd say the same thing next administration. Trump just gave back what they stole, is that they would use it against him, but he's acting like that's not going to happen, probably because he's embarrassed about it. And I bet you if they have to make a deal, that will be the one thing Iran demands will have to happen. Just to make a point, I bet. This process should go very quickly. That most points are already negotiated. Sure, totally not, though, seeing as how the two things you screamed, they both said are lies. But here we are yet again. The news comes as a 10-day Israel-Lebanon ceasefire takes hold. Now, that's a separate conversation, even though it's connected. I mean, I'm going to cover it that way, and because they are the same conversation. But it's frustrating that people don't, I mean, everyone involved in this, anybody who's been paying attention is well aware this is not going to hold. That Israel has been violating this, and as we speak, has already been encroaching on multiple locations. They're currently occupying more beyond the blue line than they were before. It's one continual encroachment based on new narratives. In another Truth Social post, Trump claimed that Iran had agreed to hand over their nuclear dust, an apparent reference to its enriched uranium. Trump said that Israel would not be bombing Lebanon going forward. Not even remotely what's actually going to happen. And not that he has any influence over what Israel does. It says the USA will get all nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. You called it a transaction, didn't you? This deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either. Not subject to Lebanon, but I promise they'll stop bombing Lebanon. Sure, going to work out, I'm sure. But the USA will separately work with Lebanon and deal with Hezbollah situation. Oh, wait a minute. So you're at war with Hezbollah. Okay. You're bombing Hezbollah back and forth. So you make a deal with Lebanon to stop Hezbollah. And somehow that's a ceasefire. You weren't even Lebanon. We're told you're not in Lebanon is not the one you're fighting. You're fighting Hezbollah. So you make an agreement with Lebanon to stop Hezbollah, but we call that a ceasefire. Okay. Now Hezbollah has actually stopped bombing based on that ceasefire, but has not said they're a party to the ceasefire. And this is a mirage, guys. It's designed this way. And I'm sorry, I'm getting into it now. We're going to get to it in a second. It's about the defensive discussion, how they're allowed to defensively, defend themselves. They call everything defense. So basically they just gave them an out and said, we can bomb them when we want to. Not on the other side around, though. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. Well, they did right after you said that. That's a fact. The moment they said this was happening, the Israel continued bombing Lebanon like they do. I mean, every time I've ever covered the situation, Israel always does that. They make a point to go, oh, well, one more. We're going to finish out that operation, and then we'll be done and go well over the ceasefire. They're just making a point to the world, guys. Now, again, this is important, as I said a second ago. The deal was already reached on the 28th to give up the nuclear stockpile and to no longer seek nuclear enrichment of any kind for a civilian or anything else. It was all on the table. They had agreed, and Israel blew up the deal. It's all very well documented. How that doesn't get discussed repeatedly by any of the corporate media shows you how broken they are. This was a publicly discussed. This involved the U.S. government, guys, and Israel bombed them that night to stop the thing that now Trump says he's trying to make a deal for. So successfully got a deal for the things you already had. Well done, Trump. That's weakness. That's him framing his loss as a win. It's just like Stephen Miller's been doing the entire time. Now, here is the updates I want to go through. We'll go to the top and then we'll come back. I'm going to go through some of the ones I showed here. So remember, as we're hearing from Trump, let's read this first, actually. Now that Hormuz Strait is over, the situation in the Strait is over, he says. I received a call from NATO asking if we needed some help. It's not over. It's a momentary thing. And if Iran does not give what it wants, which I doubt they'll do, then this goes right back to where it was. This man desperately needs a win. And it says, I received a call from NATO asking if we need some help. I told them to stay away unless they just wanted to load up their ships with oil. They were useless when needed. Well, they're not just a blunt force. It's supposed to be if you're attacked. You weren't attacked. Facts matter, Mr. Trump. That's basically obvious. The USA will get all nuclear dust created by our B-2 bombers. No money will be exchanged. We just read that one. Iran will help, with the help of USA, it says, has removed or is removing all sea mines. Guys, that's nowhere. That's on Trump's Truth Social. That's it. The evidence for that has never been verified. And guys, this is what I keep showing, and I find this just to be embarrassing. As I've been showing you the entire time. Oh, I don't know why that's not loading for me. It's supposed to be Hormuz. There it goes. Okay. So this is the Strait of Hormuz right there. Right now. live, right? So we're to pretend that there are random mines throughout the entire strait, but yet you've got constant traffic of civilians, commercial, everything. That's real traffic. And that's all these different things. Okay. You've got cargo, tanker, passenger, fishing, warship, tall ship, tanker, tugboats, pilot boats. Now, we understand it. Tanker, warships are probably being somewhat, well, technically tanker's supposed to be going through, but Trump said he's got a blockade. We're going to get into that in a second. But the point is that all the rest of this is currently going through the strait. That's what we're looking at. How do you want to factor in that there's somehow mines floating around in there? And also, let's realize that that is not something that aligns with what I think Iran has said they've done. They never claimed to do that. They said it's only closed for you guys fighting us. So that wouldn't make sense to put mines throughout the strait. Now they could, and they have in the past. But the evidence is not there. And all you got was Trump coming out saying, and remember, I made a point about this. If you put mines in the strait, that'll be a violation. But they haven't done it yet. He literally said that. How dumb is that? And then 12 hours later, mines in the strait. It was just a coordinated argument because, as I said, I'm of the mind they needed this. They needed this to be closed because the argument was Iran is fighting the world. It's extorting the world. And if they didn't do that, well, then they had no argument, right? The only problem was that they were being hurt by this because they were being restricted. Now, they pressured and threatened and gaslit people to stop going through. Even right now, there are people right now who are afraid to go through because they think there are still mines in there. That's what the U.S. and Israel did. They're the ones that shut this down, guys. That's my point. Now, so here's what Iran said. After Trump comes up and says, no more enriched uranium, they promised, and the strait's open forever. Saeed Mohammed Mehdi, a spokesperson for Iran's president, has lashed out at the baseless statements of the enemy. Shortly after Trump and Iran had agreed never to close the Strait of Hormuz again, the quote, the condition and limited reopening of the conditional and limited reopening of a portion of the strait. That's the reality. And look at what Trump yells out. Is solely, he writes, an Iranian initiative, one that creates responsibility and serves to test the firm commitments of the opposing side. Apparently, they failed that right away. Right? I mean, clearly, if this was Trump comes out and says, we took everything and we win and they're weak and we're going to beat them and maybe we're going to fight them still. He's done that too. And this is, why would you make a deal with anybody like this? If they renege on their promises, they will face dire consequences. Quite different when you hear it from what Iran is saying. He also suggested that Trump's statements were aimed at stripping the Iranian nation of their sense of pride for the great victories they have achieved through their resolute defense. Right? Because, guys, Trump needs this to be a win for him. Like I said, from like the first week, I feel like he's going to turn around and claim the original situation was what he got was with him winning. And look at how close I am to being right about that. Just an opinion. That's what he's kind of already doing. So what he's doing on top of that is trying to make it seem like they're so weak and they can't fight back and they've been destroyed. Their Navy's gone. Their Navy's not gone. There's ships out there right now, guys. I mean, and yet we just keep going with the lies. Half the corporate media says their Navy's been destroyed. It's painful. So Iran's announcement of the opening of Strait of Hormuz is no free-for-all, they write. It says Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz completely open for the 10-day period of the Lebanese ceasefire, but said ships would have to use a coordinated route. Military and diplomatic analyst from Al Jazeera said that this route would take ships into Iran's territorial waters, giving Tehran a chance to keep its finger on the trigger. Quote, the parties are not trusting each other, so they're not going to want to leave their pressure levers out in the, out of their hands. Adding that the U.S. was keeping its blockade in place. The analyst described the current phase as a trust-building process. Again, if that's the case, then the U.S. has failed as usual. For Iran and the U.S., as well as for the maritime world as it assesses risk of resuming traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, vessels will need IRGC permission. They come out. See, all this is coming out because Iran is watching what Trump is doing and going out, well, that's not true, and putting out their statements. And it says the IRGC Navy Command lays out Iran's conditions, for passage through Hormuz, which it said includes obtaining permission from the Iranian military. Very different than what Trump is yelling out and what all of his lackey morons are screaming about right now on Twitter. Civilian vessels will pass through a designated route. Military, now, understand that is for the civilian vessels within this current reality. So on top of that, right now, Up until this moment, that has not been the reality. You can look and see for yourself. So what's interesting is because of what Trump has driven into this and his own blockade, you've gotten more restriction than I think has ever been there because of what the U.S. government has done. And it says military vessels remain prohibited entirely. Movements will only be permitted within the permission of the Iranian military. This movement is in line with the agreement on the period of silence on the battlefield and after the implementation of the Lebanese ceasefire, which again, they violated the first day. I'll show you them telling you that. Now, that's who's to say whether they're going to argue that's a violation or not. That's what Israel usually does, is they play it really quickly in the very first moments and act like it was some carryover and they're lying about it or whatever. And so usually they let it go, which that's why Israel does it. It's kind of they get to poke them in the eye and they get away with it. Trump says no sticking points remain in the Iran talks. So think about that. They're already telling you he's lying about this. He stands up and says, we're all good. It's almost done. Trump, who has been taking calls from reporters all afternoon, making dozens of statements on social media posts, has now told the French press agency that there are no sticking points left for the deal, likely referring to the Lebanon ceasefire. We're very close. It looks like it's going to be a very good deal for everybody. I certainly hope so, guys, but I don't think that's where this goes. And we're very close to having a deal, Trump has said 45 times, that keeps showing to not be the case. Of course, the Iranian officials have not confirmed what he said. Iran pledges reciprocal action if the U.S. blockade on its ports persists. And here we are. So Trump maintaining the blockade indefinitely until they get Iran's deal a week from now, if that happens, which I doubt it will, is a violation of what they agreed. It's just, we agreed for it to be open. Trump then said it's open, even though he misrepresented what they did, and then maintains the blockade. Great. That's just counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense. And so the reality is you agreed to one thing and then did something else. That will violate the agreement. Now, understand, Iran would not make the agreement for this to be open for then to allow the U.S. to block only their traffic. Why would they do that in going towards a deal? So they're going, hey, they've offered clarification on an earlier post on Argachi, who originally posted this. Where was that? Hold on. Come back to those. He says, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period, which we read earlier, on coordinated route as already announced. So they just decided to go completely open and just cite that. Typical corporate media. But he says the shipping through the strait will be allowed along prearranged routes. As we said, the maritime blockade of Iran's ports continues. Iran will take reciprocal measures. So right there, this is already not going what they said it was. So if the U.S. does what they say they're going to do, which is maintain the blockade, well, Iran is going to do something about it, is what they said at the very least. Iran is the guardian of the Strait of Hormuz and will show leniency where necessary, is what they wrote. Now, on the nuclear side, which is one of the biggest, it just kills me that he would even say that, which my gut would tell me he was misled, because I just don't even understand, even from a deal-making perspective, why would you come out and yell something that nobody agreed to? That's a guaranteed way to make this not work, which may be the point. What? They said, this is the associate professor at the University of Tehran. He says he is confident that, quote, nothing has been agreed between the U.S. and Iran over the nuclear issue, despite Trump's claims. So far, nuclear is subject to discussion, and there are mediations going on. He said, there are ideas mediated by Pakistan that are being sent back and forth, but there is no agreement, which again lines up with what they've been saying the entire time, that that's not on the table. So we'll have to wait and see, right? Now, this is the one of 13. This was right before I went live. Iran and U.S. locked in war of narratives. Wow, totally new, huh? Big new experience for us all. What we are seeing between Iran and the U.S. right now is a war of narratives. Both sides are actively using competing narratives with competing claims, regardless of what is happening behind closed doors. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair statement if this was the first time this happened. Every single time we've seen Trump lie, and we've seen it go the way Iran said it was going to go. Every single time. That doesn't mean that they're telling the truth about everything. But if Trump says they want a deal, then they don't make a deal, and then it happens again and again and again and again, and the obvious point is they don't want that deal, and Trump lies about it. So in this case, if you're talking about a war of narratives, what you're getting is Iran saying they're lying to us, and Trump saying we're getting everything we want. Pretty sure you can see which side's lying right there. But that's not to say that Iran's not capable of lying. I would never say that, and I think they would if it's in their interest. Now let's go back to this, see what the recent updates are. criticizes the lack of expertise, the negotiating team. Well, yeah, welcome to the team. It's just Democrats coming out now and criticizing them, even though their arguments are always somewhat like, yes, Iran bad guy. Yes, everything we should be doing, but Trump's doing it bad. Yeah, team sport politics. But markets show optimism after Trump's comments on Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, that's always what this is, guys. Always. Today's Friday. Surprise, surprise. It's almost like it's perfectly timed. You wouldn't be the only one making that argument. U.S. Saudi officials discussed Lebanon ceasefire. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio spoke with Saudi counterparts to discuss situation, seeing if there's any new statements. Still no normal flow of ships. Well, that's because the U.S. is a blockade. Surprise, surprise. While the U.S. and Iran have announced the strait is completely open, you see how even they're framing it that way? That's clearly not what the reality is. Qatar University, let me see, uncertainty. Qatar has tried with 2 ships to get through, and it was denied access. Well, there you go. So here's the question. Is that Trump doing that? Or is that Iran doing that? And if it's Iran doing that, doesn't that now imply that they've already gone back because the U.S. already broke the deal? Most likely. Now, again, you could watch this for yourself and you could have easily come to this conclusion because you're not a moron. The evidence has been there. It's obvious who's lying. And so here we are. But we'll see where it goes by tomorrow. We're not seeing normal flow. Oh, geez. Hard to believe it's been a year. What a year. That's Huckabee, one of the most blindly Zionist supporting in the administration. Yeah, Iran says U.S. statements filled with contradictions. Surprise, surprise. That was 1 hour ago. Iran's foreign minister has said remarks by U.S. officials regarding the strait have been contradictory in a sign of desperation and helplessness. Guy, that I genuinely think, how else would you make sense of this? If they were in a position of strength, they wouldn't be doing this. This just demonstrates weakness. Now, unless, again, as always, there's just some master thing and it ends up, and I'll report that when it happens. An honest reporting of this would be that this screams you're not in a strong position. And he says we should not be influenced by the other side's tweets. The statement by American officials are filled with contradictions and lies and nothing new. I agree. Yeah, it says the opening and closing of the strait does not happen on social media, but on the ground. But see, this is the game today. Yeah, I'll leave it there. The game of these propagandists is to do this for them. That's what Trump does. Sets the tone, and they push. Eric Dougherty. The Strait of Hormuz is open. President Trump wins. Right, he wins by getting what was already there before, but in a weaker position. Art of the deal, guys. That's what apparently getting a worse situation, losing things and ending up in a worse position is the art of the deal, apparently. Iran has announced the strait is fully open and released. They're quoting Trump because journalism is blindly quoting what government says, right? I will need to bet you he kind of thinks that. Got the red light and everything. You're doing good. Here he is saying Iran has agreed to 100% full halt to their nuclear program for an unlimited amount of time. Why? Because Fox News said. It's not true, guys. Art of the deal. Art of the deal apparently is lying through your teeth as much as possible until somebody just gives up out of frustration. Apparently. Next order. Breaking. Iran has agreed to hand over all their nuclear dust. Do these guys even know what they're talking about? And to no money will be change hands whatsoever. All he's doing is quoting exactly what Trump says. Breaking with the thing Trump just posted. I'm a journalist. Please pat me on the head. Here are prohibited from doing so. God, it's just sad. This is what I was trying to say earlier. These people are absolutely... So over here, you're going, FISA, we just stopped the deep state. That was Trump's plan. Trump and Mike were the ones pushing that more than anybody. But now over here, yay, Trump's winning, the deep state. I don't think you guys even know what you're talking about half the time. There's a new account that says Iran surrendered 100% nuclear halt. It's the exact same framing, the exact same video, it's just a new, hey, look, they've got 213,000 followers already. Because it works. It's a model. You do this, you repeat it, you maybe a flag instead of a red light. Who knows? It works the same way. And it grows. Even though it's completely 100% false. And even though I know people who are in here doing the, involved with the community notes, who are in here going, that's not true. That's not true. But weirdly enough, it never seems to show up. Don't you find that interesting? I do. Also, it's just funny. Check this out. All right, it doesn't matter. So keep it going. Here's what Trump said on the 17th today. A great day for the world. Okay. He wants you to just assume that means because he just changed the world. We made a deal, but you didn't, though. And it already seems to be falling apart. President Trump just did what 5 other presidents tried to do but couldn't, says Gunther Eagleman. And what is that? fail spectacularly and then desperately claim like you gained the things you didn't, and then end up in a weaker position and scream that you somehow won something, you realize that under Biden, the strait was open, right? Under Biden, they weren't seeking a nuclear weapon. And that's not a claim to Biden. The point is he just happened to be there under Obama's when it was started. The point is, either way, they're all criminals. Biden, Obama, Trump, they're the same thing to me. The reality, though, was in those positions, they had these things already. So now you're going to say that he gained the things that existed then, but no one else has done it before? Again, these people either are this uninformed about basic things or just don't care about what they say because Trump's the team they're on. And we already know this guy's been caught selling retweets and all kinds of, they're just grifters, guys. And it's falling apart. Speaking of grifters, here's the guy who said Trump was never going to be on his team and we hate Trump and he's the evil, whatever the spitting out was over the last couple of days. Well, guess what? Iran Caves declares the strait completely open, but they didn't. At least he includes for all commercial ships, but that's not even the full reality when you understand what we just went through, and that Trump's region will never be closed again. And that's, again, lie. Lie, didn't happen, not what they agreed to, but we'll quote what Trump said because we're fighting the deep state, even though he is the state, right? By Iranians will get all nuclear dust without NATO's help. Plus, Hunter Biden, look over there. Other things we want you to think about so you don't focus on this spectacular implosion that we're still supporting by pretending like we're not. Great job, guys. Now, back to this. There is no blockade. Not really. Either they're bad at this and they're not actually stopping it, or they're really not even trying and it's all about narrative control. Even going so far as to consider that maybe there's coordination. That's not what I think. Far less evidence to that for anything else, but it's worth considering. A larger global kind of dynamic. Just to include as one of the possible considerations. But the reality is you can prove via GPS that these things are not actually being stopped the way that they claim they are. So what's going on? That's for you to decide. I'm just giving you information to make your, form your conclusion. But here's what you get from Scott Jennings. Last night, I was assured that we were in a global energy crisis from which the world will never recover. This guy drives me crazy. Him and Blanche and this like weird snide sort of like righteous indignation, kind of casual dismissal. It's frustrating. They're like edgelord propagandists. Like they're not as clever and as pithy as they think they are. The reality is this is not even remotely close to over. That's what everyone with the brain can already see. He's trying to give himself a momentary win by going, look, the prices are at 83, which was higher than it was before we started, but it's down now. We win, right? But no, because guess what? It only dropped from about 90 because you guys lied about what happened. And you must understand that is going to cause that to spin out even more, because when they realize you're lying and it's even worse than it was, it's only going to get worse. On top of the fact that they've been dumping and manipulating, which will hurt us in the long run. But yeah, no worries. This thing on a piece of this screen graphic says we're good, so shut up. This is classic. How much you want to bet? That doesn't end there. And even if it does, what he has done is not just about a number on a page, guys. He's doing things that destroy civilizations. But let's keep pretending like you have a momentary win because you yelled a lie really loud. Well, as before, in regard to the strait, they're not seeking a extortion role. They're seeking a regulatory role. Now, of course, they could be lying. But as always, what do we have? We've got the evidence in front of us. And what is that? Well, they've got the Muscat discussion where they were discussing potentially jointly working with that. Even Trump, for crying out loud, floated the idea that they might jointly manage it, but yet they're terrorists simultaneously, or whichever one you want to use in the moment. And then you have the discussion of their neighbors, which they were discussing. They were talking it with, how is this going to work? How are we going to manage this? Made discussions with the United Nations. But yes, let's keep pretending like this was meant to be some kind of piracy role, that they're working in through the legalities of that. I mean, it's just so painful that you can see so obviously. No, of course, you could argue this is all in the interest of hiding their piracy. Sure, question everything. But until you actually find that, it's like with the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthis. They can call them pirates all day long, but they never stole anything. They never killed anybody. And yet you guys are out there bombing fishing boats and murdering and stealing and raping, but they're the pirates, right? This is what I believe the reality is. Probably because it's in their interest to do so. The only way you think that this makes sense for them just to be belligerent is if you just think they're maniacs. That's the only thing the U.S. government can do. They're just terrorists and they're crazy. Well, maybe that's what you guys think about, well, it seems to make sense about what you do in the world, but even then I still think you have an agenda, you have interests. In this case, this benefits them. It gives them strategic control. It gives them revenue. Why would they try to screw that up by just being like you? CBC. Blockade on Iran will continue, Trump says, after Iran says it will reopen the strait. And it says, Trump says the U.S. naval blockade in Iran will remain in place until a deal is struck, as again, I think that's already one of the reasons this is spun out. Lebanon was dragged into the war, this disgusting platform has to say, when Hezbollah began firing rockets into northern Israel on March 2nd. Yeah, March 2nd, which was supposedly a ceasefire from before. And I can literally bring up 75 different posts from every mainstream platform, from the UN, from everywhere, I can show you Craig Murray on the ground, which I will in a second, showing you where Israel continually bombed them. I can show you articles from the BBC that say Israel bombs 17, but the ceasefire holds. And yet you're going to come here and tell me that Lebanon was dragged into this because Hezbollah dared to fight back? You have to understand what this shows you about these platforms, not just the writers, but the platforms themselves that they have. And it's not just about Israel. There's plenty of other, you take Ukraine and Russia. These guys showed themselves to be partisans, not even just in the case of the left, right, but they took a side. You can't, that's not journalism. In this case, the same idea. This is about, you've clearly taken Israel's side in all this, and now Hezbollah dragged them in, even though you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel was illegally bombing them. I mean, they never stopped, guys. Aragachi in Iran said the passage of ships would need to be along those lines that they control. And he also said Iran has agreed to never close. He also said Iran has agreed to never close the strait again. You have to understand that this is what we're dealing with. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I think that's Trump. I'm going to take it back. If this represents a step towards an opening, it is a welcome development. He says, however, the situation remains unresolved with a number of outstanding uncertainties, including questions related to the presence of sea mines, applicable Iranian conditions, and practical implementation. These aspects will need to be clarified before any transit can be assessed, said the head of Norwegian Ship Owners Association. So these people, despite what's happening, are still going, well, we don't know. Why? Because of the lie put forward by the U.S. administration and Israel. Now, you need to think about that for a second. That if Iran, as we've been proving to you, has been letting people go through other than the ones that are fighting, and now Trump is the one forcing in the blockade, and people are still afraid because of the lie of minds, they have manufactured effectively the shut that they wanted you to think was there from the beginning. And now I bet you will use that control to benefit from it. Like that, I'm even wondering whether right now they're going to try to actually seize control of this for the ongoing future, for the interest of making money and controlling the flow. Even though everything about that is the exact thing they always said Iran was going to do, and that's not even what they tried to do. I hope it doesn't happen. I get the sense that might be where this goes. Now it says British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, said on Friday that more than a dozen countries were ready to contribute assets to a defensive mission aimed at restoring freedom in the strait. That's interesting, isn't it? First of all, because I'm sure Trump's mind is they, were too afraid to get involved, and probably they were. But it's also because it was a bumbling, destructive, failing agenda that no one wanted to be a part of. But now he comes in and says this. Now, this is what I want to consider this. Is this look, I'm going to say this first. I don't believe for a second that they're going to mobilize against the U.S. in some real way. But consider whether or not this is them who did not want to be part of his original discussion of militarily going through the strait when clearly Trump was aiming that way the entire time. But now we're discussing, after this has already been going on with Trump and, the U.S. and Israel and Iran in particular, and says we're making a discussion of dozens of countries to militarily open the strait. Is that aimed at Iran or Trump? Now, that may seem like an obvious question, but think about it for a second. Like maybe just as a sentiment to say, well, whoever it is, we need to open this. And this is what I think Iran was trying to accomplish with the way they did this. They didn't shut it down. They didn't mind the strait. They simply said, you guys in particular are not allowed through this while you're doing this. And that then opened the door for everybody else to continue. And then suddenly it was only Trump or the U.S. government and Israel who were truly suffering from this if that continued to go that way. So you could argue that because they were involved, the UK, all their allies, well, then suddenly they were in a bad position and that they wanted this to stop. Now, they could have, it still could tough it out probably for a period of time. But how long until they start to truly suffer, like a form of sanctions? And then I would argue they don't care whether Trump or they just want it to stop. See how that's how that works. And so you could argue that if pushed far enough, they may just go, look, we just need this to stop. Whether, Trump, you need to get out of the way. We want this to be open. Just a thought to continue. And it continues. Quote, we will take this forward with a military plan conference in London next week where we will announce more detail on the composition of this mission. And over a dozen countries have already offered to contribute assets. Before you argue, look, see, I told you they were helping Trump. Reopening the strait is a global, it says right here. Stammer told reporters along with the leaders of France and Germany and Italy. It's down there. Sorry, it's the next one. He goes on to say, reopening the strait is a global necessity and a global responsibility. See, it's sort of like from a global framing. And he says, we will therefore take part in the further military planning discussions that are taking place and would also like to see the United States participate, if possible. We believe this would be desirable. So they're literally meeting 12, 13 countries, whatever he said, and discussing a military action to reopen the strait, what the U.S. is not involved in, or at least as he's claiming. So I can see a world just as likely with Iran playing this right, where they would be saying, look, you all need to get out of the way, which would effectively just be the United States stopping what they're doing. Just a thought. I know it seems unlikely, but it's worth considering that maybe where this goes. And if it does, it just speaks to how well Iran played this. But it could obviously go the other direction, where essentially this becomes the focal point against Iran. And if it is, it's because I would argue that that's just how it was. Israel and the United States government have ways of basically coercing agendas the way they want them to go. Now, this is from Iran, and this was give his title here for you. Hold on. Brigadier General Ibrahim Zulfikari. And he says, this is today, 5 hours ago. 3 conditions for ships to pass. Now, you already heard these. These are just him reiterating them because there's so many lies going around. The ships must be commercial vessels, military prohibited, right? And it says, and neither the ships nor the cargo can be linked to belligerent states. So they're still doing that. Now, is that because of the way it was before? Or is that now the reality because the U.S. has already broken it? The ships must pass through the route designated by Iran. The passage of ships must be coordinated with the Iranian forces. It says the U.S. Central Command confirmed. Oh, this is interesting. So it says the passage of ships must be coordinated with the Iranian forces responsible for the passage. As the U.S. Central Command confirmed before the war that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard controlled the Strait of Hormuz. So does that sound like what Trump is saying? Now, I'm again, either Witkoff and everybody else are saying whatever Iran wants to hear and then lying to Trump, which just seems to be only in the interest of Israel and chaos, or Trump's lying to us about what was actually said. Either way, it seems that what they're of the mind is that Iran is gaining control, and that ultimately, as the U.S. Central Command confirmed, they're the ones dealing with it. I doubt they would publicly want you to confirm that they're allowing what they told you were terrorists to militarily escort people through the strait. This is contingent upon the implementation of certain terms, and there it is. Certain terms and conditions for a ceasefire in Lebanon, which they already violated, and if the naval blockade continues, which it is. So guys, this is a designed implosion. They're going to blame Iran and say that they did X, Y, and Z, and they never had intentions because they do it every time. And the maintenance of the blockade alone and the bombing of Lebanon are already violations. It will be considered a violation of the ceasefire, and the passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be closed. I'm just typing this has already happened. Can't type. So, going back to the strait itself. Oh, you know what? See how funny. I'm looking at my note and I already forgot. We're going to try it next time. Sorry, guys. Just being genuine for those that saw the beginning. That's what I have trouble with. It's like I just can't, in my mind, I don't want to break away from the momentum that we're just the conversation, the flow of content. I'm gonna try to make that work in somehow. Please keep reminding me. Maybe I can do it at the end sometime. I'm just maybe not today. That's in regard to the break and sort of the donations and reading chats and whatever else. And it's just not what I like to do, but I know it's important in some cases. We'll get back to it. So that's where we are right now. Clearly, there's no blockade in effect if you're watching ships flow back and forth through the strait. That seems to be pretty obvious, at least not in the way that they're claiming. And as we showed you before, you can GPS track it for yourself. Now, here's an interesting connection. I'm not familiar with this person, and frankly, I don't think I want to be. But Tara Servatia says, fun fact, absolutely no one has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. Not Trump, not Iran. Now, it's interesting, right? I agree, actually. But here's where she goes with this. Iran started a rumor that it mined the strait. Not that I can see. That's not, as far as I can see, that started with Donald Trump floating the idea that it was possible. And then, of course, I mean, I think there are examples of Iran, not necessarily the government, but other elements within the conversation, influencer, making the argument that they could be. But as far as I could tell, there was no direct, and either way, the evidence shows that it's not the reality. But I don't think that came from anybody but other than Trump. But either way, still a small point. She just wants to say Iran started the rumor. It's certainly possible. But I think that's important because that suggests that they would want it to be shut. I argue the opposite was the case. The opposite was that they wanted to threaten Trump and Israel and them from coming through, that will bomb you, but everybody else is allowed. But it goes, which now looks untrue. Aha, because it is. Because there are no mines. They've been going through the entire time, as far as I can tell. But it goes, and insurance companies refuse to cover ships due to the risk. We showed you that in the beginning. That's why Trump had talk about that insurance conversation. Remember that? So obviously they created the error that made the effective blockade the case, whether or not Iran did that. Why? Now, it says Iran is incapable of a blockade as the U.S. destroyed its Navy. Well, that's not true. I mean, this is the frustration with these people that, whether honest or not, seem to be operating on what the U.S. government and the State Department tells them about what they're doing, even though they lie to you every single day. The U.S. destroyed its Navy based on, Robert argues, and I think the evidence has continued to come out, especially since Trump has lied about that number every time I've heard him talk about it, that they put these ships inside of these underground caves they created before this ever started. The videos were going around about that well before the war started. So the argument they did that to sort of hype something, that was before. There was no reason for them. They did this showing people they were preparing for this idea, burying things. And now guess what? Now you have evidence of ships. As we just saw an Iranian ship threatening the other ships from coming through the strait when they were in that moment. And yet he destroyed their Navy. You know, and so either way, I'm not going to speak to the number. I know they destroyed some ships, but they arguably have not destroyed their entire Navy. And whether they're capable of a blockade seems unlikely. But it says Trump is currently blocking ship traffic to and from Iranian ports. Also not true. Not entirely, as we just showed you. He's not blocking the strait. I don't think he is either capable of it or even trying. In the sense of truly, in the sense of just what would make it make sense, I would lean towards not capable of it. Because I do think there's an element to make this feel like Iran is doing it. So they started this, but then we saw the Chinese ship go through, and I think they just called their bluff. And Iranian posts. But it says the American media sucks. Keep repeating this for the same thing. Okay. Now this got fact checked, and it says Iran has partially blockaded the strait since the February of 2026. I agree with that. Partially is the point. The only thing I push back on is the argument that it was closed. And that was what they wanted you to report. It was never closed. It was simply restricted for their enemies. And so you have to realize that these kind of arguments, this is a tapped in mainstream. It's just not accurate, guys. And then funny enough, here's Tankers Trackers. You just bought your credibility a first-class ticket out of town with this map, which is just like an AI slop map they use. But anyway, to finish, here's what he said about Lebanon. And this is the last part, which is just frustrating to me. First of all, just going back to the point where he says, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, all the rest of it, right? So Lebanon is a huge part of this and clearly was part of the conversation, as now they're basically back to admitting. But funny how when they needed it to work, Israel said no, and they all just lied about it. And now they're right back to going Iran, Lebanon, Iran-backed Lebanon, Hezbollah. Well, okay, then if that's the case, which we always knew it was, then why wasn't it? Then, you already know this. They made it part of it. Pakistan knew it was part of it. Trump and his team also knew that. They agreed to it. And then they just lied to you because Israel said is genuinely what I think. Now, Lebanon is part of it, which will also cause this to fail. But it's independently important of its own, in regard to what Lebanon and Israel have been going through, rather what Lebanon's been going through because of Israel. But I want to point this out. This is the kind of thing you see on this platform that just makes it so obvious. This person says, I thought the Iranian regime was going to control the Strait of Hormuz, charge tolls, become a superpower. Khomeini died for this deal. There's such wild ignorance. First of all, they still control the security of the strait, clearly, as demonstrated every single day. And on top of that, whether they charge a toll or not shouldn't be some kind of international issue. Every other strait does it. But the idea that he is acting like they've lost right now because Trump screamed lies shows you how pathetic and uninformed these people are. But on top of that, do you realize what this is? Imagine this was the Pope, right? Imagine whatever religion, whether Judaism or whatever else, imagine it is one of the highest religious people in, not a military person, But imagine that was the Pope right there. And this was somebody saying this, screw Christians, you all deserve to die, or whatever that is what this is. And this platform doesn't care. Now, I'm not calling for it to be censored because I don't believe censorship should exist from a state-controlled platform like this, or any platform rather that claims to allow free speech. But the point is the hypocrisy. No, I shouldn't even say but period. Point, though, is about hypocrisy. That right now, should you post anything like this about any religious leader in Israel, you know more than anything in the world, it would be instantly shut down this platform. I mean, they just have to show you the hypocrisy of all this. And these are the kind of, and these are the unradical people fighting for good things, clearly. Now, in regard to the bombing, just like every single time before, Israel bombed like crazy right up until the ceasefire was supposed to take effect, because that's what they do. Even, and look, technically speaking, that's not a violation, but you understand, it shows you no interest in seeking an actual peace. If you're just like, let's just squeak in as many murders as we can right up until we're supposed to pretend we're fighting peace. They don't want that, guys. So this you can read through, and it'll show you all the different attacks they carried out on the 7th, or rather 16th, right up, and when I think it was, where was that? Well, yeah. Well, obviously that pic is AI. Who said that in the chat? because it's a dog with a man said. I'm pretty sure we all learn that. Sorry, somebody in the chat said that's AI. It's clearly. But the point here, guys, is just simply read through this if you want to understand how many attacks there were up until that. But that the main point for me is the post that they violated it. Now, first, Glenn points this out on the 16th. So you're supposed to be seeking a ceasefire, right? We made a deal where Trump said he's going to rein in Israel. Yeah, it's laughable. And we're going to make an agreement with Lebanon, not Hezbollah, but we're seeking peace. And Israel strikes in Lebanon have killed 172 children as attacks target homes from Hezbollah war front lines. Or excuse me, far from the front lines. This is Haaretz, the leading Israeli newspaper. They're literally targeting civilian homes way back from the front line because these are monsters we're talking about. As Glenn writes, good morning. As you navigate your day today, please remember that if you are an American who finds this morally objectionable and don't want to pay for it and arm it and go to war to enable it, then it means you're a bigot and an anti-Semite. Govern yourselves accordingly. And it still gets no reach at all. This whole story is just insane. This disgusting settler that literally was, these are the ones that are raping and torturing and burning houses down and laughing as women suffer, who are literally on this whole thing getting caught, like, threatening and manipulating this woman who basically pushes back, and everyone makes it about she's an anti-Semite. It's just so bad where we are. Not because, I shouldn't even say it like that. Where they're trying to keep us. Where we are is giving me some hope. Because people, from the sentiment, the awareness, we all see this, guys. You know it. No matter how many want to deny it, everyone knows this is there right now. And that's important. That's a win. Now, celebrations in Lebanon as 10-day ceasefire with Israel begins. Displaced families begin moving towards southern Lebanon. Now, remember, if you haven't been paying attention to this, they've been occupying southern Lebanon since the 80s? And reality is that they have, since October 7th, been aggressively encroaching. They've got, I'm going to jump to the end really quickly. Don't forget, guys, they quite literally have areas. Or was that? Sorry. I hate when I do that. Where is that? Dang it. Tell me I didn't lose that. It's probably right next. Watch. Well, that was dumb. Oh, here's right here. Okay. We just talked about this. Right now, Apple and their maps are literally ethnically cleansing the names of southern Lebanon towns. It's verifiable. This woman literally reached out and they gave her some BS response. They're ethnically cleansing the maps for what's about to change, and we can't be honest about this. They've had conferences where they have Hebrew names on Lebanese territory, where Ben Gvir is dancing with settlers, and we can't be honest about this? Sickening, guys. It's sickening. So the people who are now moving back to southern Lebanon are, just like with Gaza, bumping up against an Israeli military who won't let them back to their homes. Or if they do, they're now at Israeli military will do whatever it wants to them, whether maybe bombing them, starving them, raping them, which they've done every single location they've been occupying. It's funny how many people would go, how dare you, Ryan? You mean aside from the verifiable evidence and the 1,000 times the UN's called them out and human rights groups and Amnesty and B'Tselem, they're raping people in prison. But yeah, keep griping about how I call those things out. Displaced families moving back to southern Lebanon and Beirut's southern suburbs, despite warnings by officials not to attempt to return to their homes until it's clear whether the ceasefire would hold. Why? Because Israel always violates the deals. The Lebanese army, not Hezbollah, said early on Friday that Israel committed violations of the ceasefire after it took effect. Guess what you won't hear from any of the corporate platforms? The fact that that happened, including intermittent shelling of several southern Lebanese villages because, clearly military targets. The Israeli military is yet to comment on those claims. You mean the fact that you can video and prove and imagery. The bottom line, guys, is that this was a point. My opinion, this is Israel saying, we don't care. We're going to murder your families over there and you're going to take it. How else do you take that? This is the next day. This is in the ceasefire we're supposed to believe is in effect, and Israel targets villages. Yeah, that's the reality of where we are. I hope Hezbollah acts nicely than Trump posts on True Social because he's a monster too, and nicely and well, I guess, during this important period of time. It will be a great moment for if they do, after their families got bombed by Israel, no more killing. Must finally have peace, he says. Either the dumbest person I've ever seen in my life or a monster lying about the murder he knows is taking place. Willful ignorant, if you will. Take away dumb. How in the world you can't see what's going on? You know he does, guys. He's either living in a hole somewhere in the White House and has no clue what's happening until Miller tells him what's going on, or he knows what he's gaslighting about. Death and destruction for his agenda. Just like Biden. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he agreed to the ceasefire to advance peace efforts with Lebanon. But, as usual, that Israeli troops would not withdraw from the security zone. Cool. The security zone, which otherwise means a legally occupied territory that was somehow enshrined as some momentary security zone that will never go away because Israel plans it that way. That's a fact. You've ever heard of the Blue Line? The Blue Line in Lebanon was a demarcation line. So it's supposed to be a line where they go, we're going to pause military right now, or, violence. It's supposed to be in the interest of some kind of downgrade and ceasefire. But no, they just maintain that occupation forever. And that just becomes, that's just the reality. That's no longer Lebanon. Oh, it's still Lebanon. A demarcation line. Not an official international border, mind you, established by the UN in 2000 to verify Israel's withdrawal from southern Lebanon. Oh yeah, the thing that never happened. So you realize also how toothless the UN is. If you can literally create a situation where you're supposed to do, and they never do, and here they are encroaching and taking more, and we're going, whoa, it's all about their occupation. I mean, what? Fill in the blank. With all this information, what is that? They continue moving forward and they're defending themselves? This is just sickening to anybody with a brain. Now, the bottom line is, guys, they've encroached on this every single time. And you can read through this right up until 2026. They are now moving about 20 miles north from where they're supposed to be moving back from. Why? Well, because they stopping Hezbollah. You mean in the locations they've already planned out settlements for? Are we really that stupid? Some of us appear to be, or at least gaslit enough by Zionists. Literally ethnically cleansing digitally on these maps. They responded, guys. They responded. You could, I don't want to waste the time. We are aware that some of our outlets have incorrectly reported that certain village and named and towns are gone. They're gone. You can look for yourself. It's not available in all regions across the globe. Oh, it's a glitch. I see. A glitch. It just so happens to remove the exact location where Israel's taking territory. It has plans for settlements. Great, quite the glitch. Okay, well, what is in the Lebanese ceasefire deal? And will it hold? From Reuters. Israel and Lebanon have agreed, not Hezbollah, mind you, Lebanon. So if you're confused about that, understand the Lebanese government is largely occupied, manipulated by the U.S. and Israel. But I argue is seeking a way away from that, but is largely can be coerced, let's put it that way. Hezbollah is a popular resistance movement supported by the people because of the illegal occupation of their territory. They frame them as the bad man, the boogeyman, the evil people, the terrorists, because they dare to fight for what's theirs. Time to wake up, guys. This is the whole world. It's easy to see. Doesn't make them good guy either. It just means that in this circumstance, they have the right. They are the ones fighting against the occupier. That's all you need to know. Now, Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a ceasefire in fighting between. Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a U.S.-backed ceasefire in fighting between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah. Yeah, the thing they just told you has nothing to do with Iran, apparently 20 seconds ago. A deal meant to enable broader U.S.-Iran negotiations, but one that will see Israel forces maintain positions deep in Lebanon. Oh, surprise, surprise. So they gained territory through illegal occupation. Apparently that's the way of the world today. Isn't that what Trump and Miller are telling you? Yes, it is. Israel and Lebanon agreed to implement a cessation of hostilities on April 16th for an initial period of 10 days. Oh, we perfectly align with the Iran conversation. And then they bombed them. The deal says Lebanon's government, with international support, would take meaningful steps to end the war, to stop military action? No, to prevent Hezbollah and other groups from carrying out attacks. Whoa, okay. So you have a ceasefire, and basically the deal in this ceasefire is to keep attacking Hezbollah, the group that you're now saying you made it. I mean, they're just playing the world, guys. They're playing anybody that doesn't understand that this is not the, they're claiming they're going after Hezbollah, Israel. Well, what they're doing is just they're coveting Lebanon. So then they're fighting with Hezbollah. Then people call for a ceasefire, Iran and others, which includes that. Then they make an agreement with Lebanon to keep fighting Hezbollah, and they go ceasefire. That's how stupid this is. Who knows? I mean, there are Iranian elements that are pointing out, because it is yet to truly show itself this way. Mark my words. My point was going to say is why they wouldn't already be calling it out. Some of them are. It's inevitable, but as Iran continues to say, why not? Let's just see if we can make this work. I doubt it will. And that's not because I hope it doesn't. I hope it does. It's because of what Israel has always been. And it also says that Israel and Lebanon recognize the country's security forces, quote, as having exclusive responsibility for Lebanon's sovereignty and national defense. A reference, of course, to the government and basically to, what was that again? I can't see it, what the word is. Basically just to get rid of, hold on, let me get back to where it was. Basically just a point to make it the argument that only the Lebanese government is the one that can act militarily and have defense and security. The point is that Hezbollah has to be gone to disarm Hezbollah. That's not what's going to happen. Under the agreement, Israel, quote, shall preserve its right to take all necessary measures in self-defense. Oh, okay. Well, then this means nothing. That means Israel can do every single thing it's ever done anywhere in the world if it wants to. That's what that means. Because every single thing you could point to, they call self-defense. Everything, everywhere. Every action in Gaza, every action in Syria, every action everywhere. So what they just said is, well, we have the right to do whatever we want, whenever we want, if we feel justified. But we'll call that a ceasefire. And we won't even make it with Hezbollah. What a spit in your eye, guys. This is embarrassing. And it goes, and again, I'll even finish the sentence. Israel shall preserve its right to take all necessary measures in self-defense at any time against planned, imminent, or ongoing attacks. So just understand what they just said is we can bomb Lebanon and say it's because they were going to attack us. The Bethlehem Doctrine. So all they really did was enshrine the exact circumstance under the guise of a ceasefire. Welcome to Israel politics. Hey, and the U.S., by the way, which I think is one and the same thing. Beyond this, it says Israel will not carry out any offensive military operations against Lebanon targets, including civilian, military, and other state targets. I'm so glad you included civilian, like that's a legitimate target that you're choosing not to go after. You guys are monsters. In the territory of Lebanon by land, air, and sea. So all they're really saying is it won't carry out offensive military targets. But should they feel self-defense, which is everything they've ever done, same point. So all they did is we can do whatever we want. That's what that means. The 10-day period can be extended by mutual agreement as talks progress and depending on whether Lebanon, quote, effectively demonstrates its ability to assert its sovereignty. All that means is if we don't feel that Lebanon's stopping Hezbollah, then this all keeps going. Then guess what, guys? It's going to keep going. Lebanon is in no position to stop Hezbollah. It's just a game. As always, it's infuriating for people that are paying attention. And I mean, there are people that are way more immersed in this than I am. Imagine how frustrating it is to see so clearly. Ask Craig Murray. to have constantly have the evidence that proves they're lying, and yet it just keeps going because the corporate media, the mainstream alternative, they have no interest in being honest. It's a business. The deal does not require Israel to withdraw from southern Lebanon. It's a legally occupied territory and previously a place they were required to withdraw from in the previous discussion that they've only encroached forward. Where's the UN? It says where Israeli troops have been destroying villages and infrastructure all across Lebanon after ordering residents south. And is that against Hezbollah? No, guys, that's Lebanese territory. You're going after Lebanese infrastructure, not Hezbollah. Kills me. The area makes up about 8% of Lebanese territory. Israeli defense officials say troops are holding positions as far as 10 kilometers inside Lebanon as part of their buffer zone. Yeah, which is just what that means. They're taking that territory. Watch. To prevent Hezbollah attacks on Israel, of course, even though the only reason it's even there, the only reason they even exist is because of your illegal actions. Viewing the area and many of its villages as strongholds for Iran-backed groups. Right. You know, like that village full of innocent civilians you just bombed because you were about to join a ceasefire you didn't want to actually join. And so you just murdered them and called it Iran-backed anything. Right. While the deal grants Israel the right to take defensive measures against planned attacks, it does not include similar terms for Lebanon. So at the end of the day, Israel has the right to bomb whatever they want and say we were going to be attacked. Never need to define or ever verify that. But on the other side of it, neither Lebanon, which they're not even making a deal with Hezbollah, but not even Lebanon has the right to do the same thing in reverse. Quite the deal. All it shows you is Lebanon just agreed to what they were handed, guys. They're not in control. That marks a contrast. I mean, I take that back to a degree. My point is just all said and done, Israel's the one influencing the situation. But I do argue that given the opportunity, I'd like to believe that these people would fight for some kind of way out of that. That marks a contrast to the 2024 deal to halt Israeli Hezbollah fighting, which was, see, that's Hezbollah, you understand, which said these commitments do not preclude either Israel or Lebanon from exercising their inherent right of self-defense. Right? They didn't do that this time. They made it just only we're allowed to do that. That's pretty obvious. The deal also does not mention the fate of hundreds of thousands of Lebanese who fled the area south of the Litani River, some of whom have already started returning home. Well, we saw what happened in Gaza. I doubt it's going to go well for them, which makes me very sad. Hezbollah halted fire. I mean, let's be clear really quickly. They're taking this territory, guys. That's what they want. They have designs for it. They've had meetings about it. So these people are going to go back, just like with Gaza, to find their homes taken. That's where this goes. And if you're not paying, I'm not going to make it a ubiquitous statement. I hope they get what they deserve back. I just don't believe that's what these people will do. History's there for you. Pay attention. Hezbollah halted fire at Israeli targets when the ceasefire came into force, but stopped short of publicly endorsing the deal. It said any ceasefire must not grant Israel freedom of movement within Lebanon, and that the continued presence of Israeli troops on Lebanese land granted people the right to resist. They're right. No matter what Lebanon or Israel says, the international law, Geneva Convention, is clear. The illegally occupied territory has the right to armed resistance, legally armed resistance. So all they're saying is, whatever you guys do, if you continue to do this and stay in this territory, we will fight you because we're fighting for the people of Lebanon, not the government, not the power structures, which who knows? Maybe they're lying about that. Maybe they'll change when they become a government. Hope not. End of the day. They're saying right now that if you do this, which they're already doing, then this won't stand. So it's not going to stand. Which means as of right now, Hezbollah is probably already fighting them again, and Israel will then point to them and say, they're still fighting us, even though you made a deal with Lebanon, not Hezbollah, because somehow it's their responsibility to stop them from fighting me, right? So then if they fight me, you didn't stop them, so it's your... What is it, kindergarten? It's just so stupid, guys. It's designed to fail. That's what they do. After a war sparked by Israel's assault on Gaza, Israel and Lebanon agreed in 2024 to an open-ended U.S. brokered truce, which clearly the U.S. doesn't care about, that called on Lebanon's government to disarm Hezbollah. Same point. Following the 2024 deal, Israel continued to carry out strikes on what it said were Hezbollah depots and fighters in attacks that I can't read that. It says basically, I think it's Doctors Without Borders said killed 370 people in Lebanon. Here's the point, though. The reason that happened is exactly what I just highlighted. Following the deal, the ceasefire, in which they said that we could defensively fight still, which is that's what they're still doing, they claim. but said that we're making a deal with you, Lebanon, and you have to stop Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is still being able to fight. Therefore, we can continue bombing. So that's the same situation they just created. Why that any honest person in any position of insight stands up and goes, we did it, ceasefire, it's great, it's going to hold because Israel, they're just lying or they're the dumbest person in the room. I hope it does, even though there makes no sense. I want people not to suffer anymore. In Gaza, Israel and Hamas agreed in October to a U.S. brokered deal to halt fighting and to deliver aid in the territory. They've gotten less aid in the last so many months than the entire situation. They've been being bombed the entire time. It was followed by a U.S. plan aimed at disarming Hamas in exchange for Israeli troops withdrawals from and the construction of Gaza, much of which was destroyed by Israeli bombardment. Many aspects of that plan, almost every single one of them, have failed to take shape. So all they really said right there in a very, very lazy and dishonest way, they didn't do what they promised. But we're not going to criticize them because we'll only criticize the enemies of Israel and the United States. Thanks, Reuters. But at the end of the day, they made a deal to stop these things. Guess what happened? They didn't stop those things because they're liars. Simple as that. Israel's occupying territory in Gaza. They're building out locations. They're seizing everything they can. It's not even being talked about right now, guys. It's an entirely flat parking lot they turned it into. Didn't they tell you that? Didn't they literally say turn it into a parking lot? Didn't they literally say Amalek, not a stone on a stone? Here we are. Israel's continued attacks on Gaza, killing more than 750 Palestinians since the so-called ceasefire. How can you even write that without any commentary? Israel says it aims to thwart attacks by Hamas and other militant factions, but rarely provides verifiable evidence. Great job, Reuters. You can't include the obvious. Well, then they violated the ceasefire. Good job, guys. Sickening to me that these people act like they have standing in the conversation. Well, Israel has violated Lebanon's ceasefire 100 times just in the first week, 2024. I already showed you. They've already violated the day this started. Now, as of right now, I can check while we're talking. I haven't seen any evidence they've done it so far, like since this started. But they already have and historically always will. 100 times in the first week of 2024. Well, here is Craig Murray. 62 times. That's how many times Israel violated the so-called ceasefire in Lebanon just basically from the last 5 days of when we're talking about. So this is December 1st. I don't know when she posted this video, so I don't want to give the wrong time. But when she I don't know when he said the video. She posted on December 1st. But whenever it was recorded, it was 5 days before that. And the point was, in those 5 days, they'd violated it 62 times. Craig was on record saying thousands of times they violated it since 2024. Do we think it's going to be different now? Why? It's the same false agreement.
The so-called ceasefire agreement is a really dreadful agreement. It's very, very hard to believe that Lebanon signed it.
Now, to be clear, what he's talking about right here is the older one, not the current one. This is just for frame of reference for where it currently is. I'm sure he's probably making similar comments right now about the current discussion.
The fundamental problem is that it says that all Lebanese groups will cease all military action against Israel. And it says that Israel will cease any offensive military action against Lebanon. So the qualification saying that only offensive action will be stopped doesn't apply to Lebanon, it only applies to Israel. So Israel can continue action if it characterizes it as defensive. And of course, that's what Israel does. And we're now into the 4th day of the ceasefire. And I don't know what's happened today. I'm hearing Israeli drones overhead. On the first 3 days of the ceasefire, Israel committed 51 violations of the ceasefire, all of which Israel say were not violations of the ceasefire because they were defensive actions. That included 3 missile or bomb strikes. Yesterday's was a drone strike.
So he goes on to make it very, very clear. Remember, this is 2024, guys. It's identical to where we are. You're telling me all these stuffy journalists in their high towers don't know this information, or are they just are they a Don Lemon that doesn't even know what they're talking about, but was brought in from entertainment news to be the big journalist? Right? It's a show, guys. The evidence has always been there. People like Craig Murray, a real journalist, has been telling you that's been there. People ignore it. I don't know why. So here is what they do, right? So Israel is being held back momentarily from murdering people, so it has to go somewhere, right? So it starts murdering people in Gaza. In their tents, barely surviving. Well, they're withheld from bombing right now in Lebanon, so they go right back to killing people in Gaza. Because that's what any monster does, right? You got to keep killing, right? Israel targets Gaza water facility, kills 5 Palestinians on the 17th. That's today, ladies and gentlemen. Here's another one. This one's from the 17th as well. Israel attacks and kills several over 2 days in Gaza, despite the so-called ceasefire. No one cares about that, though, because now we're pretending the ceasefire is over here. So now we're no longer pretending the ceasefire is here, so we just ignore Gaza. This is a disgusting reality of what's really going on in our so-called media sphere, right? These people are not real, guys. I mean, the sense of what our media pretends to be. Here's an interesting spin back to the opening part. Here's what Mario said on the 16th. As one of the most vocal critics of Hezbollah, I guess him, I have now changed my stance. What in the world? Hezbollah should only disarm when Israel either pulls out or guarantees to pull out of South Lebanon. I changed my position after seeing Netanyahu blow up homes, schools, and hospitals. Oh, you mean like every other time over the last decade? Like you have to ask yourself. Because realize, in every other point, this guy is still parroting all the same stuff. Suddenly you see this? Because this is a sea change in regard to the two-party illusion. That's what this is. That's why you're getting all these weird shifts of suddenly Trump's the bad guy, even though half of them are still right back to basically supporting what he said today. If you suddenly see him blowing up homes, why didn't you care in 2024? Why didn't you care way back in the 90s? It's been going on a long time. A disgusting war crime. Okay, what about the war crimes the U.S. government's committing right now in Iran? What about the ones Israel's committing in Iran right now? What about the ones they're committing in Syria? Mario? Don't get me wrong. He says this does not mean Hezbollah should not disarm. Oh, there we go. Do you condemn Hezbollah? Do you condemn Hamas? Right? You and Piers Morgan could go get an apartment together, okay? This is so frustrating. Hezbollah should not have to disarm because it's fighting against an occupying force and they have a legal right to respond to that. But see, this is a game. This is about trying to convince you that, oh, we see it. Now we hate Trump because Trump bad guy. And then they go right back. This is what these guys do. I don't even think half of them know it. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that, Mario. Israel's been publicly bombing homes and civilian infrastructure in Lebanon and every other illegal war while even bragging about it, while all of us have been screaming about it. So what made you suddenly see it today? Of course, no one's going to respond to that. Now, Greater Israel Project is obvious. Okay. And this is the driving force for what they're trying to accomplish there. Always important to understand. That's a patch that's on their military that they deployed in Gaza. And that's what the Greater Israel the general idea looks like. BBC News. Israel demolitions leveling towns in southern Lebanon. Like literally demolishing these areas because they are trying to build the very settlements I just talked about. Wherever I just showed that. I guess I closed it already. Where did I put it? Right there. Right? That's the area of Lebanon that Israel is trying to take that they have now wiped out on a map by Apple for obvious reasons, guys, because they have plans to recreate it. That's what this is. So wiping out entire towns in Lebanon is not a new thing, by the way, but I want to point this out. That was on the 16th. Okay? You know what else was happening on the 16th? These people in the White House.
And have you...
Oops. Oh, I guess I didn't. I thought I had the video. I guess not. But basically, you probably saw this. They're in the White House. Paula White with I don't know why she's standing so weird, and filming people praying in the White House, in the whatever room this is in, with a band playing Christian music. Okay, that's great, right? Fine, whatever. Whether it's Muslim music or Jewish music, fine. It's a religion. People have religions. It's not good or bad because it's the religion. So all of you extremists out there, whether you're Christian extremist or religion or Jewish extremist or Muslim extremist, you can all go live somewhere else together. The point is, as these people were in there singing about Trump and God sent Trump. As they sang, U.S. bombs were murdering innocent children, literally. And by the time they finished this song, an entire Lebanese town was removed from the map. I'm not questioning the faith of everybody in this room. Make that clear. Many of them could just believe this is a good thing happening. I'm just questioning their situational awareness because they're being used, whether they realize that or not. And it makes me very sad because a lot of people could have good intentions, but the people, I mean, look, if you believe Paula White or any of these people that are up there are actually like it's like saying Rabbi Shmuley is a man of God. You don't cheer on the death and destruction of anybody if you're a man of God or woman of God or anything. Or, I mean, you can make your own decisions. The point is that there's objectively obvious things. If you're screaming for violence, cheering on the death of children, right? Praising God, Trump as some kind of godsend as he supports the murder of people, then you're not really a person of God. It's just, that's my opinion. Take it for what you will. But I want you to understand that while they were in this room singing about Trump and God, Trump was murdering people or being a part of the murdering of entire civilizations. And here's Vance, by the way, literally you guys all saw this, I'm sure, in a Turning Point USA event. It's supposed to be like their corner, right? You're killing children, they were shouting out. God doesn't support genocide, they were yelling out. As he writes, this is not Antifa. It's not a left-wing college student. This is Turning Point USA, the most conservative of the conservative youth. They are not stupid, and they don't fall for your BS talking points. He's talking about Vance. They're actually pro-life, unlike the fake Catholic POS Vance and his neocon demon allies, he writes, who are killing children. I'm telling you guys, it's just not there. It's like at the Charlie Kirk thing, spun them out. Many of these people were up there the next day asking about USS Liberty, and these people were sweating. Literally, Glenn Beck was sweating on the stage when pressured about a lot of these talking points. This is the dying side of this, guys. Whether it's the media, the government, the two-party illusion, this is going. And that's why they're desperately trying to recreate the next control structure. And we're trying to help you fight it. And here's how much it's costing for them to argue probably just that under the guise of either way you want to look at it. Your government is spending an endless amount of money on the Iran war they promised wouldn't happen, on wars in general they said weren't going to happen anymore, right? With an agenda that they said was not going to embody what they were fighting for. It's more spending, bigger government, every other thing you could point to. And here is how they have to answer this question. How much are we spending on this, by the way? You know, American tax dollars.
And have you included, Director Vogt, estimates or a fund for the war in Iran in the budget you presented to Congress?
No, sir.
Are you planning to present that in short order?
We are working on a supplemental for Congress for additional needs. We're working through that review process. Part of it is the length of the war, part of the operations overseas, part of it is the extent to which some items might be fiscal year 26 or 27, and we're working through that.
Thank you. Would I be in the ballpark to say we've already spent at least $50 billion?
I wouldn't want to make a characterization of that at this point.
Okay. I would say, as the most knowledgeable person in the executive branch on the budget, I would expect you to have pretty good numbers on that. So I'm a little disappointed in that answer. My understanding is that the most recent plans, at least circulated in the press, have been to present a supplemental of somewhere in the ballpark of $80 to $100 billion. Is that more or less where you're headed?
Well, again, I think my guess is if you were to be on the inside of the Department of War, these costs would fluctuate given the day. And so I think it's hard to give you an average cost.
Right. So, 80 to 100 billion, give or take a few billion. That's what he's actually doing. Let's just absorb that. Fiscal conservatives, absorb what we're actually dealing with right now. Absorb the reality of the lie and the mission creep and everything any of us had always told you, whether Kamala or Trump, would be the way of this government.
And that's one of the reasons we're going to come after much work and review to give you a full request with time.
Thank you. I do think it's important when a budget to include all the things that we know are going on in order to have a good foundation when it's presented.
Yeah, right. Somebody rightly points out in the chat, the characterization, right? How about you just give us the effing facts, right? How about you just give us numbers that we're asking for? Well, I wouldn't want to characterize it that way. They're so disgustingly political. And that's what they love to frame as that's what the left does. It's like they're all exactly the same thing. They just act like when they do it, it's good because we're fighting the bad thing. It's the same thing they do everywhere else in the world. Oh, so you are the same thing. Exactly the point. Clayton Morris points this out. America has now spent over $51 billion as the counter continues to go up on Israel's war. And with the clip you just heard, estimating upwards of potentially $100 billion. And realize how short this has been happening. So understand that's not like if this goes on for as long as some of these have, we're in the trillions, like some of these others long-term war on terror dynamics. With Iran since February 28th, these are conservative numbers. And here's what Rand Paul had to say about this.
Why would we as a country borrow money to give money to people? So we give money in foreign aid. We give money around the world to all these countries around the world. We're giving them money that we don't even have. We have to borrow the money from China. We've sent $200 billion to Ukraine. And do I have sympathy for them? Yeah, I have sympathy for them. Russia attacked them. But we shouldn't borrow money from China to send it to Ukraine. And really, the Europeans need to take care of this. This is in Europe. This is right next to Europe. This is a European problem. And we just can't be the sugar daddy for everybody around the world. So I completely sympathize with you on this. Infrastructure is something, if the money's going to that, we should do it. But it also still needs to be not borrowed money. It frankly needs to be money that comes in through taxation. And I'm doing my best to police this stuff.
Your money.
Doing my best to try to make them balance the budget. This month, I'll introduce the penny plan again. And the reason I get to, normally an ordinary member of the Senate doesn't get to do their own budget. It's one from the Republicans, one from the Democrats. How come I get to put my budget in every year? Because neither one of the parties produce a budget. There's never a budget. So the rules say if no party introduces a budget, anyone can. So I introduce mine every year, and I got to vote almost every year because neither the Republicans or the Democrats bother to introduce a budget. And if they do, the budget never balances. And I've told them I'm not voting for a Democrat budget or a Republican budget if it never balances. Somebody has to be responsible for this money. And I treat the money as if it were yours, which it is yours. We ought to treat it, as if it were being, our own money.
Okay. Well, keep that in mind, right? Bear this in mind for the next point. But just before we move past this, the insanity of what he's saying right there, the idea that they just don't do it. And if they do, it doesn't matter anyway. It's like the Pentagon audit, because we are being laughed at, like not in some kind of like sneaky way where you have a document that proves that you know the inside thing and now can see it. No, it's publicly displayed. This is the sinking ship, and these people are stuffing their pockets. It's in your face. And this has been going on a long time, you understand. It's a long, and it's not just some like 3-day, we're talking about a long-term, slowly sinking empire. And these people are rapidly enriching themselves. And he's saying he's putting forward a budget because no one even does it. And it kills me how clear it is that this situation is decrepit. It is crumbling in front of us. And no, these people are not trying to build it back together. They're trying to rebuild the new control structure to keep you in place. At the very least, consider what we're saying. Don't ever take my statements at face value. Research this stuff for yourself. But, he stands up and he makes a big statement about how we just can't keep giving money every which way to foreign countries, and then turns around and votes to do the exact same thing. Senator Rand Paul voted to continue to send arms to Israel. And yes, this is the reality. And as this person rightly says, Paul lost my support. I mean, how can you make that argument? I'm sure he has a case. Well, I wanted this, which was in this, and so that's what I did to get that. Fine. Guess what? That's why politics is disgusting to me. Compromise is a dirty word when it comes to this situation. And at the end of the day, if you believe what he just did, in what world could you vote to do it? I just think that it makes my skin crawl, the kind of thing we're dealing with. And sadly, I look at Rand Paul as one of the better elements of this whole situation. Look at where we are. I mean, whether you think that means there's some kind of pressure on him or whether he's lying when he says it, I don't know, guys. But we just got to be real with ourselves. It doesn't mean you should ignore him going forward. Listen to what he says. Question him. Hold his feet to the fire, whether or not he's honest, because that's how we should do this if you want to be involved at all. But we just got to stop playing this ridiculous game, because they will play you back. U.S. Senate Republicans block latest bid to rein in Trump's Iran powers. Right, because they're fighting the bad guy Trump. Okay, well, and then the latest on the House vote also falls short. What a weird coincidence. It's almost like nobody in the government actually wants this to stop. They're like, Trump's a fascist, tyrannical, blah, oh, here's more FISA powers. Trump's a monster, he's a Nazi. Oh, here's more war powers for Iran. How can we all be this blind? And here's the thing, guys, if any of this got in the hands of honest people out there who don't even know we exist, you know as well as I, it would change their mind. Not the partisan blindness of people that want to take a side. The honest person who just doesn't get this information, who cares about the facts. If this came across them and they go, what? Like, how does that make sense? How are the Democrats fighting him and trying to take him down, but then allowing him more powers? Because they're not really doing what they're framing it as. What they're doing is building your new prison, in my opinion, or whatever you want to call it. Building the thing they're going to use to dictate your future, or working with Israel to achieve their version of the same thing, spying on you, suppressing your rights, continuing to build this thing around you. And none of them, even as they all scream about the obvious illegality of this, choose to do anything to stop it. I don't know how much more clear that can get. All I hope is that enough people can see this and share it with somebody who might just be able to get it in the right people's faces to make something happen. I'll keep doing what I can. If you believe in this platform and you believe what we're fighting for and you believe we can actually make a difference, help us. Show us what you mean. Show us how important this work is to you. And we can continue growing and doing more shows and writing more articles and, more things that we have on the horizon right now. But, it's always up in the air. There's always one more lawsuit and one more attack and one more thing. It's the world that we're in. And I'm willing to take on that trouble. Because I believe in this. I believe in you, and I believe it's worth fighting for. So help me. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. But I would just like to suggest that one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that. But I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. It's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.